Good morning, everyone. We're going to start off slowly just to make sure that folks can find their way in from our new format, the Zoom lobby, which may be a new feature to many of you who haven't used Zoom conferences before. And we appreciate your patience as you navigate that. If you do have any questions throughout your time here, you can reach out to Maddie, MADI, at thestreettrust.org. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sarah Iannarone. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the executive director of the Street Trust. And I am delighted to welcome you to the 11th annual Oregon Active Transportation Summit. Thank you so much for being here today. I want to give a special thank you to the Street Trust staff, especially our community engagement manager, Maddie Carlson, who many of you have interacted with in the last few weeks preparing for this time together. She's done a fantastic job managing this event, and we're grateful for her. We're also thankful to our steering committee who put in many volunteer hours shaping the very robust agenda, which you have in front of us. There are over 100 presenters this year, and I want to say a welcome to you as well, and thank you for being here. And especially big thank you to our sponsors. They have generally stepped up in support of the important work of charting our transportation future, which is the theme of this year's summit. We've crafted a hybrid event to ensure your safety in the midst of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. There remains a lot of uncertainty out there and differing comfort levels with regard to the recovery and where you're at with that. So we hope this event will be accessible to you wherever you are. The speeches, plenaries, roundtables, presentations, and panels will be hosted via Zoom. If you get lost, you can go back to that Zoom lobby to reorient yourself. It's a virtual clearinghouse where you can choose rooms from that central place. But our networking events, our mobile workshops, and a range of study tours are going to take place in person. And I will tell you in advance that the forecast can be iffy the next couple of days. So those will be happening rain or shine. For the next 3 days, we're going to gather in community as leaders from across sectors, including state and local electeds and officials, policymakers, people working in local transportation departments and community-based organizations, engineers and planners, business owners, health professionals, labor representatives, educators, and community advocates. We are so glad you're here because together we're going to explore topics from justice and equity to resilience and recovery, accessibility and safety, technology, innovation, and much more. This is an opportunity to celebrate our accomplishments, to share our innovations and collaborations, to exchange lessons from our wins and losses, to understand each other's best practices in terms of transportation policy, funding, planning, design, and delivery, and most importantly, to drive change. We all know that investments in public and active transportation are critical to reduce traffic fatalities and serious injuries, address climate change, remedy racial and economic injustices, create family wage jobs, and to build a thriving economy. That's why it's so important that we spend the next 3 days together charting a course for the future of transportation in the Portland metro area and beyond. The discussions we have here will be recorded for dissemination and ongoing learning. Some of you may be playing catch up as you log in this morning. Don't worry, you won't miss out. You can go back and rewatch whatever you missed later on. Interestingly, we've come up with something new this year. Following the event, the Street Trust will issue a summary report highlighting key themes, priorities, strategies, and other takeaways from the summit to share with decision makers around the state and region. To that end, we've designed our opening morning a little bit differently. We're going to begin straight away with that policy conversation steering our community toward a stronger transportation future. Metro President Lynn Peterson will deliver a state of transportation in the region address in which she will lay out for us her vision for the greater Portland Metro region's mobility future. Her speech will be followed by 2 separate roundtables, one comprised of community leaders and the other of government and agency officials who will respond to and elaborate on her remarks. President Peterson will be introduced by Cassie Wilson, a youth, climate, and disability rights activist and the newest member of the Street Trust team. But before that, we are honored and delighted to welcome to the summit and to welcome home to Portland, Irene Marion, who currently serves as the director of the Departmental Office of Civil Rights for US DOT. Ms. Marion is a proud graduate of Howard University who has served in roles in the nonprofit, philanthropy, and government sectors, including the U.S. Student Association, National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, Congressional Black Caucus, Coalition for a Livable Future, and the Funders Committee for Civic Participation. Most recently, Ms. Marion served as Equity and Inclusion Manager for City of Portland's Bureau of Transportation, where I met her and where I'm sure so many of others of you here did as well. She's here to engage and inspire us this morning as we embark on this journey. Irene, thank you for being here today.
Good morning, Oregon Active Transportation Summit, and thank you, Sarah, for your kind introduction, and to you and the Street Trust team for the invitation to today's event. As introduced, my name is Irene Marion. I use she, her pronouns. I visibly present as a Black woman with fair skin, short hair, and big glasses. Today, I'm wearing a tan jacket and a crimson dress. Behind me is a photo of the U.S. Department of Transportation headquarters in Washington, D.C. I know the world continues to be a lot, and I hope that everyone in the space today is doing well. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Civil Rights Director of the U.S. Department of Transportation and as a Biden-Harris appointee under the leadership of Secretary Pete Buttigieg. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Secretary, the U.S. Department of Transportation leadership team, and our nearly 55,000 colleagues across the country. While it is an especially exciting time in DC and a great opportunity to serve in this role, I must say I'm really excited to be returning home to Portland and Oregon to connect and reconnect with many active transportation leaders in this forum. It's a critical time for us to recenter on the opportunities that lie ahead for federal and local partners looking to advance transportation equity and climate justice. I accepted this role at the end of 2020, a year that changed us all. It will be recorded as a time in history that our nation and our world had to acknowledge many types of disparities and the systems that perpetuated them. And it was particularly interesting time to be in this region. On camera, Oregonians showed up to express solidarity with the movement for Black lives over months of actions and activities. But the real magic and the hard work was happening behind the scenes, often in policymaking forums. Leaders across the state were activated in whatever role we were in, whatever position we filled, to grapple with the history of this state and to invest in working towards a new future. As I reflect on that time, and specifically all the things that Black, Indigenous, and people of color experienced and had to navigate, I have to pause to acknowledge all the things that happened before 2020 as well. Really, our resistance in this region for at least 200 years is what led to that moment. And it was really in the last 10 years or so that we've had a particularly interesting set of activities being activated around this region. Community leaders have been pushing Oregonian politicians to aggressively address racial disparities through policy and budget investments. The various governmental bodies began to respond. At the request of community leaders, the City of Portland established the Office of Equity and Human Rights and adopted a racial equity commitment. Legislative bodies and municipalities across the state also began to adopt similar commitments. A cohort of equity practitioners in government started to form and grow. And there were new spaces and more forums dedicated to advancing equity. Allies were stepping up, but also stepping back to center BIPOC voices. There was evidence that we in Oregon were doing the work. And that was trickling into the transportation sector. PBOT created equity manager and public involvement positions and began to apply an equity lens in project planning and delivery. Metro and other entities began establishing equity offices, dedicating budget and creating space for community-led visioning and policy investment centered on communities historically underserved by our local transportation system. Multnomah County's racial and ethnic approaches to community health program began to more actively research and engage on the link between transportation and health disparities in Black and immigrant populations. In fact, the last time I attended this meeting in 2019, Charlene McGee-Coley and I led a PBOT Multnomah County presentation on centering Black communities in active transportation. While these actions are well documented, I know most of it firsthand because I was in the trenches with many of you who were making it happen. And I offer this reflection at the opening of this event because I know that when you are in the thick of it and you're moving from one equity initiative to the next, it can be hard to stay grounded, to feel the progress, and to remain hopeful that the efforts will have a long-lasting impact. Now that I'm in the federal space and have insights into transportation equity initiatives happening across the country, I can say that Oregon is making good progress. And I'm proud of your continued efforts. You continue to keep me inspired as I lead in my role at USDOT. As Civil Rights Director, I'm responsible for ensuring that USDOT and our federal funding recipients are compliant with civil rights obligations such as Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, the Americans with Disability Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, many workforce protections and obligations related to our Disadvantaged Business or DBE program. Under the leadership of Secretary Buttigieg, I'm also co-leading USDOT's implementation of the Biden-Harris administration's whole of government approach to advance equity at the federal level. It is a historic opportunity, and we've recently reached a very important milestone, the public announcement of equity action plans across 90 federal agencies. At the U.S. Department of Transportation, our equity action plan focuses on 4 areas: wealth creation, power of community, interventions, and expanding access. With this focus, USDOT will be working to ensure that the use of federal dollars does not lead to harmful outcomes for any communities. While this will be a multi-year and likely multi-decade effort, it represents a significant shift in our priorities. And we've begun to align DOT's strategic plan, annual budget process, and research agenda for this to meet these needs. DOT has also activated around the president's many other equity-focused executive orders. We're in the process of finalizing a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility strategic plan for our workforce. We are activated around the Justice 40 commitments to maximize climate program benefits for historically disadvantaged communities. And we are developing an action plan for the implementation of the first ever national strategy to advance gender equity and equality in the federal government. I encourage you to visit our website, transportation.gov/equity, to learn more about these and other equity efforts happening at USDOT and to sign up for invitations to upcoming forums. And of course, the backdrop of all of our equity initiatives is the bipartisan infrastructure law. This once-in-a-generation investment of $1.2 trillion to infrastructure across our nation, about half of which is coming into transportation and flowing through U.S. Department of Transportation. Our federal equity commitment means that local communities will have access to new funding programs meant to address previous harms and intended to center community voice in project planning, design, and delivery. We'll be standing up technical assistance to support community partners and funding recipients as they seek to strengthen transportation equity commitments and local transportation plans and projects. We're working to modernize our civil rights programs and enforcement activities to ensure that the use of federal dollars does not lead to disparate outcomes. And we're working to support small minority and women-owned businesses as they pursue contracts on transportation projects. Given the recent history and local commitments to advancing equity, I know that our transportation partners across the state of Oregon are ready to engage with us in this work. In fact, I'm hopeful that today's discussions and the forums throughout the Oregon Active Transportation Summit can provide a space for us all to check in, remember our local equity commitments, and discuss how to leverage these local and federal opportunities to shape an equitable active transportation future for Oregonians. Oregon, I am depending on you to be a shining example for transportation equity practitioners around the country. Keep doing the work, keep creating space and resource communities to engage in decision-making and implementation strategies. Keep holding government leaders accountable to delivering on and deepening those commitments over time. Keep innovating in the name of equity. I look forward to listening into this week's discussion and joining you for some of the in-person events. I'm also using my visit to Oregon to really recenter myself on the awesome transportation justice activism and progress happening in this region, and to keep me fueled up for the work ahead in DC. I'll close here and offer again my thanks to the Street Trust for the invitation to join me today. But thank you, also for your commitment to continue to advance transportation equity and justice as a part of your organizational agenda, and for centering community voices in the dialogues happening this week. Have a great event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Marion, for being here and for sharing about the important equity work being done at the USDOT. It's really exciting to hear, and we're just so grateful for you being here with us and joining us today and over the next few days. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cassie Wilson. I go by she, her pronouns, and I recently joined the Street Trust staff as their community engagement assistant. I live in unincorporated Clackamas County, and I've spent the majority of the past couple of years organizing alongside other young people for climate, transportation, and disability justice. Growing up, I felt like Oregon was the safest place in the country when it came to extreme weather and natural disasters. And maybe that's because for most of my life, it really did seem that way. But the climate of the Oregon I grew up in is not the same climate as we're living in now. I had always been concerned about climate change, but I thought that if I were to feel its impacts in my lifetime, that it wouldn't be until 40 or 50 years from now. The past couple of years made me realize that's not the case at all. Over 1 million acres of our state were on fire. Hundreds of thousands of people were in evacuation zones, including the entirety of Clackamas County in 2020. When the news came on and said everyone in our county was in at least a level 1 evacuation zone, I was standing in the kitchen sobbing as I begged my parents to pack at least the bare essentials. They too had felt invincible to the forces of nature. So many of my memories from that time exist as sound bites from the local news in my head. I remember the press conference when they said they were pulling all of the firefighters off the Riverside and Beachy Creek fires because they were too dangerous to fight and they feared they might be merging. Our state was then clouded by some of the most hazardous air quality in the world. I knew I was no longer safe from the impacts of climate change. No one is. And other parts of the world have been feeling its effects for so much longer. I couldn't unsee it. For most people my age, 23 and younger, we've all had that moment where we realize the status quo is not sustainable. For some, it was having to wear a mask inside to protect themselves from the hazardous air quality as wildfire smoke seeped into their homes. For others, it was the ice storm a couple months later that left them without power for days. And for many, it was last summer's heat dome, which claimed the lives of dozens of Oregonians. As young people, we're seeing all of this. We're seeing our communities being impacted in real time, knowing that the science says this is only going to get worse if we don't do something about it, and then watching people in positions of power make decisions that will only make climate change and its impacts worse. It's infuriating and is the reason that young people across the region and across the world have been organizing to stop climate change. Earlier this year, PPS students advocated to ensure that the district passed one of the most progressive school climate justice policies in the country. Students from across the region have been organizing climate strikes, such as the one in September of last year that brought out thousands of students as they walked out of class to signal just how important climate action is to them because they need a livable future to study for. How are young people supposed to figure out what we want to do with our lives while watching our futures be left unprotected? We spend all of our free time trying to get decision makers to realize that every decision is a climate decision that is impacting our present and future. 40% of our state's reported emissions come from transportation, and for an entire year now, youth climate activists with the Portland hub of the Sunrise Movement have been striking every other week, demanding an end to freeway expansions. An entire year. Protesting, giving testimony to every level of government, meeting with elected and other public officials. All of this instead of just getting to be kids, instead of just focusing on school, extracurriculars, hanging out with friends, living through a pandemic. A lot of the time when people see youth climate activists, they tell us we're inspiring and that the future is in better hands, and then use that as an excuse to sit back and do nothing. But doing nothing is not an option, and neither is doing the bare minimum. We need people in positions of power fighting for us and with us and taking the bold climate action we need to meet the urgency of this moment. Shifting our state and region's focus away from freeway expansions would be a fantastic place to start. We are not on track to meet our climate goals, and we know that freeway expansions do not fix any of the problems they claim to solve. Freeway expansions increase greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. They're bad for our communities, our health, and our planet. That is moving in the wrong direction. Instead of spending billions of dollars on freeways, we could have frequent, reliable public transit. We could have more and better inner city transit. Once I got the wheelchair lift in my van and was able to start taking my mobility scooter places, I was able to start riding the Max into Portland instead of having to drive the whole way. And it's genuinely been so liberating, stress relieving, cost effective, and has gotten me outside more exploring our region. We could invest in programs like the Portland Streetcars Rider Ambassadors Program, which makes transit feel safer, more welcoming, and helps meet the needs of riders. We could invest in complete bike, walk, and roll networks. Every kid should be able to bike or walk to school and feel safe, supported, and have fun in doing so. Additionally, we should be making it as easy and affordable as possible for anyone who wants a bike or other micromobility device to get one that meets their needs. We could also invest in innovation for mobility devices for disabled people because e-bikes seem to be pretty technologically advanced compared to my mobility scooter, which can hardly go up a hill. And systemically, we need to reduce the barriers to new active transportation infrastructure. When I've asked about plans to get bike lanes and sidewalks on roads that people already bike and walk on, but just aren't protected in doing so, I've been told that they can't put in active transportation infrastructure because someday they want the 2-lane road to be a 5-lane road, and they can't afford to do that right now. We have got to start prioritizing people instead of single occupancy vehicles when it comes to planning the future of our transportation system. The safety of those getting around without a car should not be dependent on expanding automobile infrastructure ever, but especially in the midst of the climate crisis. We have a lot of big dreams for how our transportation system needs to be improved, and there's a lot of work to be done, but every ounce of effort is worth it if it means that future generations have a livable future to count on and a better transportation system to rely on. As young people, our imaginations aren't limited by political feasibility and maintaining the status quo because that's not what meets the urgency of this moment. You cannot balance climate goals with goals that light the planet on fire. We know every degree of warming matters and there's a lot at stake, but we also already know what we need to do to dramatically reduce emissions. We just have to start doing it and speed up this transition. To all the decision makers here today who might be struggling to see the path forward to this better world, I strongly encourage you to work with young people on imagining it and then use your position to build it. Give us something positive to show up and testify in favor of. If you put yourself out there for us, we will show up for you. A better world is possible, and together we can create it. I now have the honor of introducing Metro Council President Lynn Peterson, who goes by she, her pronouns. President Peterson leads the nation's only elected regional government, representing over 1.7 million Oregonians in the Portland area. In this role, Peterson directs a staff of more than 1,000 charged with affordable housing and parks investments, protection of farms, forests, and water resources, planning and investments in transportation, overseeing tourism and cultural venues, as well as the management of garbage and recycling. Prior to serving as Metro Council President, Peterson worked in a variety of roles in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. She first held elected office as a Lake Oswego City Councilor before becoming the first elected chair of Clackamas County, one of Oregon's fastest growing suburban and rural counties. A transportation and land use expert with degrees in engineering and planning, Peterson served in Salem as senior advisor to former Governor John Kitzhaber before serving as the director of the Washington State Department of Transportation, appointed by Governor Jay Inslee. Please welcome Metro Council President Lynn Peterson.
Thank you, Cassie, and a big round of applause for Cassie. That was so inspirational. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to thank the Street Trust for having me here to speak. It is so important for us to find ways to stay connected today and be able to talk about the issues and solutions. So thank you all for your time today. I'm actually in Vancouver this morning, where the Interstate Bridge team is holding a workshop about how to address this important nationally and regionally significant project. I wish I could join you in person today, but I need to be here to advocate for Greater Portland's values of action, climate action, advancing equity, and long-term stability in the new I-5 bridge. I'll talk more about that in a moment, but first I want to talk a bit about where we are at in our transportation system and where we are going. I'll start today by talking a bit about Metro's role in our regional transportation system. They're interconnected and equally important. The first is representing the 1.7 million people of the Oregon side of the greater Portland region as their elected government. And the second is managing the regional transportation plan as the federally designated metropolitan planning organization. These two roles inform each other. As Metro councilors, we have to answer to our constituents working through our representative democracy to engage in some really difficult, complex work. And as the holders of the RTP, we have to ensure our planning complies with a host of federal regulations, from pollution restrictions to color of money issues that present opportunities to leverage investments, as well as ensuring that our region's transportation efforts work well across city and county lines. As we get set to prepare a new regional transportation plan in the next 18 months, I want to talk a bit about how I view our region's transportation evolution and the priorities I hope we all share in moving this work forward. Nothing touches our daily lives quite like our transportation system does. Even if you've been working from home for the last 2 years, you've gone to the store, you've probably had a package delivered, something you bought online, and you've taken your kids to school or to softball practice. Many of you are starting to go back to the office and are being faced with some familiar challenges: unsafe streets, long commutes, transit that doesn't get you where you want to go or come often enough or doesn't feel safe to use. And the people who bring you goods are being faced with challenges too. It's hard for landlords or contractors to schedule maintenance appointments. Your package may come at unpredictable times or take more days to get to your home. So when I think about our transportation system, I think about three key issues: safety, transit, and business efficiency. I think most of you in this room care deeply about transportation safety, and it's not just physical safety. There's dozens of ways to feel vulnerable on our commute, whether it's because you are worried about being profiled on your commute, stressed because of the implications if you're late to work, missing your family because your commute is too long, or experience the unique vulnerability of riding a bike around and in cars. These are all valid safety concerns, and they're all part and parcel of the safety issues we have to address in order to improve our transportation system. Let's be honest, a lot of the issues that we're facing are old, but many of them have surfaced even more as we've watched the stress of the last several years weather down the social contract of care for each other. I want to applaud the Portland Bureau of Transportation on their new safety camera at 122nd Avenue in Stark and East Portland. We may not be able to trust humans to avoid implicit bias in their decisions on whether to enforce traffic laws, and we certainly can't expect police to be everywhere watching for someone who wants to speed or run a red light. But the camera doesn't have a 12-hour shift. It's providing constant vigilance against roadway violence caused by people who choose to put others in danger. And hopefully with the launch of this program, we can start to rein in the me first attitude that is too prevalent on our roads and restore some of that social contract. But one camera isn't going to fix this situation alone. It's not going to immediately make things safer. As we work in this time, we need to pivot away from the level of service being the be-all end-all of roadway design to a more community-centered approach. We need to think about how we build our roads to ensure safety for cyclists and pedestrians. There's a sad irony that some of the safest streets in the region are in areas like Happy Valley, places where there aren't necessarily a lot of destinations to walk to. Now, obviously, it's easier to design a safe street from the ground up rather than to retrofit an existing road for safety. But we know the template. We know how sidewalks, lighting, and separated bike lanes make everyone feel safer. We know how street trees not only make walking more appealing, they also keep our city cooler. What we lack is resource. I was excited last week to hear the president come to Portland and talk about infrastructure, and the federal bill helped. But we still have billions of dollars of transportation needs in this region, and the money to address those needs has to come from a voter-approved transportation funding plan. In any other region in the country, such a plan would be relatively easy to pass. We'd ask the voters for a 1/4-cent sales tax for safety, and they wouldn't bat an eye. We'd ask the voters to build transit as a way to fight traffic, and they'd see their clogged 14-lane freeways and say, that didn't work, let's try something else. But we don't have a sales tax, and we don't have the easy fixes. And increasingly, we have to address the fact that many, many voters don't feel safe on transit. What do I mean by not feeling safe on transit? There's a lot to unpack here, starting with how we get to transit. The reality is it means different things to different people. A person of color might not feel safe on transit if they're worried it will subject them to racist bile. We all still get chills up our spines when we think about what happened at the Hollywood Max station 5 years ago. Whether it's harassment from fellow riders or profiling from law enforcement or safety walking to and from transit, communities of color are facing several challenges when it comes to being comfortable returning to transit. In a recent survey, a full 76% of the region's residents said concerns about crime keep them off transit. Even among communities of color, 54% said being concerned about crime was a major factor that keeps them from using transit more often. We do not meet our climate goals without addressing these fears. We do not pass a transportation funding measure without addressing these fears. So how do we move forward? I have to think that some of this is fear of the unknown. That once people start returning to transit, either for a short trip or a commute because they don't want to park near their work, they'll be more comfortable returning to transit. But there's more to it than that. There's a holistic approach that gets back to the social contract we need to restore with each other. If we want to advocate for transportation, we have to advocate for economic fairness. If we want to advocate for transportation, we have to advocate for housing stability. If we want to advocate for transportation, we have to advocate for a sense of community and well-being. People have to feel good about where they live to want to invest in it. That means we have to be resolute in whole systems approach to addressing our greatest challenges. That's why the work we do at Metro is so important. When I took office in 2019, I didn't think my time in office would be dominated by addressing housing and homelessness. But without addressing those issues, there's no space to address transportation challenges. When I took office, my main goal for the Regional Illegal Dump Patrol was to turn it into a workforce training program. I never thought it would be a solution to a crisis on our streets. But as our social contract has frayed, people have felt empowered to just leave trash everywhere. During the pandemic, we pivoted the RID, the Regional Illegal Dump Patrol, into the workforce training program that it is today, and one that I envisioned when I ran for office. And the results are paying off. Metro's RID patrol is picking up nearly 3.5 tons of garbage by hand from public spaces every day as we work to reinstill pride in our region. And once we get around the corner on the garbage crisis, workers from RID will learn new job skills while also developing stable employment. Metro's parks and nature investments have never been more critical, not just because of our work to clean waterways and support natural air cleaning habitat, but because we need places to love. And from Chehalem Ridge in the west to Newell Creek Canyon in Oregon City, we've created some new places that, well, if you haven't seen them yet, they both need to be on your summer hike list. We're rebuilding the foundation of our Civic Maslow's hierarchy, and we'll get there. Because if we want to be successful in funding our transportation priorities, we have to build the base of the pyramid first. We also have to be candid that part of that base has to support any transportation vision if we want to have public support for funding. That survey I just cited, it asked if we should prioritize climate first transportation investments or relieving traffic, regardless of the effect on the climate. About 45% of people said the former, and 45% of people said the latter. I'll remind you that we have to get to 50% for a ballot measure to pass. And from what I know about Oregon politics, there's not a lot of folks in either 45% who will support a measure working on the other side. But I think there's a path out of it, and I'd like to talk about it a bit today. First, we have to address the biggest traffic and safety headaches in our region, the Interstate Bridge, Rose Quarter, and Interstate 205 in Clackamas County. The reason I'm here today in Vancouver is because we cannot fail in replacing the bridge again. I'll remind you that the bridge I drove over today is 105 years old. Its concrete piers are not sunk into the bedrock below the river. They're resting on timber piling that has been sunk into the muddy bottom of the Columbia. Its drawbridge has to lift anytime a boat more than 70 feet tall wants to cross, blocking interstate trade. And it connects two ports that combine for about 14% of the nation's foreign trade cargo. This isn't 1917 when the first bridge was built. This isn't 1958 when the new span doubled its capacity. We need to replace this bridge with something that meets our 21st century needs. Something that keeps goods moving between our two ports, keeps goods flowing to consumers and makers in both of our cities, and keeps interstate freight traffic flowing at a reliable pace. And we need a bridge that can support people biking to Vancouver's amazing downtown or riding transit to downtown Portland from Clark County. We need a bridge that complements downtown Vancouver's renaissance. And further down the pike, we need a Rose Quarter project that brings wealth and health back to the Albina community. When the Rose Quarter project first came to Metro, I put my marker down hard. We're going to have a buildable freeway cap on top of I-5 there, because we need a complete community that connects across the freeway. I didn't want us to just have a dead zone in between two busy streets and two freeway ramps. I wanted to see a place that people enjoyed biking through, that had businesses that stitched the sides of the road together, and to make a complete community supporting the Albina vision and a form of restorative work to address the harms of the construction of I-5 half a century ago. And in Clackamas County, where I live, Metro supported the work to replace the seismically unstable Abernathy Bridge, replacing the bridge pilings with seismic ready supports that can withstand a major earthquake. You might hear this list and worry that the floodgates are opening for more driving, but we have a powerful tool at our disposal, one that I know can mitigate that concern, and that is congestion pricing. By charging people who drive for the way they use the roads, we can price the impacts of driving on our communities. And by tying that to our existing low-income fare program spearheaded by Metro and implemented by TriMet, we can ensure that people who have financial need aren't affected by road pricing plans. We can do this effectively and equitably, but we can't let no get in the way of progress. Too many no's means that Washington again pulls out of the I-5 bridge conversation, leaving us for another decade with a century-old drawbridge built on pilings buried in the mud. Too many no's drives up the cost of the Rose Quarter project, making anything more than a bare bones I-5 crossing unfeasible. And too many no's makes it harder and harder to get a regional transportation funding measure passed, one that focuses on safety and climate resilience. So let's talk about getting to yes. Yes, on closing the book on the decades-old argument on the interstate bridge by building a modern, seismically resilient bridge that can withstand a major earthquake, connects downtown Vancouver to our regional transit network, supports the international trade that shapes our economy, and is right-sized for how we want to live now and into the future, and meets the Metro Council's equity and climate goals. Yes, on a restored Albina neighborhood that doesn't see Interstate 5 as a canyon, but instead on it as an afterthought buried underneath the community. Yes, on affordable housing, on ending homelessness so that we can rebuild trust in government's power to bring us all together and address the challenges of today. And yes, on a transportation system that feels safe, no matter how you define it, because everyone deserves to feel comfortable getting around, whether it's on a sidewalk, in a bike lane, or on a bus. We can do this. We can believe in a better future. Maybe not a perfect future, but a better future. I know after the last couple of years, it's challenging to be optimistic, but we have to be if we're going to move forward. So my ask of all of you is to stay energized, stay optimistic, because that is the path, the safer, greener future that I know everyone in this room wants. Thank you again. Have a great conference.
Thank you so much for your remarks. We very much appreciate you making time to be here with us today, and also to Director Marion for being here with us today. I know that our panelists later this morning are going to be discussing your remarks in depth, and I know that you're quite busy there in Vancouver today, so you probably can't stick around, but we'll make sure that we share them with you and your team, and we're also going to be issuing the summary report. So from there, unless we have further questions, I think we will pause to set up the next session. It doesn't start until 10 o'clock. So you get a bit of a break to go refresh your coffee, reheat your bagel, grab a glass of water, and maybe even let your dog in or out, depending on where you're working, or take a walk around your office if that's where you are today. And we will be back right here at 10 sharp, since we have ample time for setup. Thank you again to Director Marion for joining us this morning, and we're looking forward to seeing her and all of you at our in-person events the rest of the day. If you do have any questions or challenges, don't hesitate to reach out to our team here. Maddie, M-A-D-I, at thestreettrust.org can help you answer your questions. I know some of you struggle sometimes to log in. You have to make sure that you log in with the email that you registered for at the beginning of when you registered for the conference. So you need to make sure that you're logged into Zoom via that email if you want to access that. All right. Thank you, everybody, and see you back here in just about 15 minutes.
In the mid-90s, so breaking
Hi
daily
there.
record highs this
We're the
weekend,
Street Trust,
possibly even the human
and
record
we're
highs.
tired
And we're
of
expecting a
normal.
streak of 100
Because
degree
normal
days, and we've
costs us time and money stuck in traffic. Normal means that the hot days keep getting hotter. Normal abandons the need of low-income communities and communities of color. And normal threatens the health and safety of everyone who uses our streets. Here at the Street Trust, we believe our future can be extraordinary. And when normal isn't working, we take to the streets and become the change we want to see. In our streets, we fight for equity and justice. We foster creativity and imagination. We champion prosperity and innovation. And we celebrate the magic that happens when we slow down and stop to smell the roses. In our streets,
اینجا خیابان‌های ما هست.
Estas son nuestras calles.
And these are our streets.
normal doesn't make the cut. These are our streets, and we deserve way more than normal. Join the Street Trust in saying no to normal. And let's make our streets extraordinary together.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you can see me and hear me all right. My name is André Lightsey-Walker. Oh, I think this video is maybe playing, so one sec. That's exciting. Okay, sorry about that. It wouldn't be Zoom without little hiccups here and there. So appreciate you all so much. Thanks so much for being here. As I was mentioning, my name is André Lightsey-Walker. I'm the Policy Transformation Manager here at the Street Trust. And I'm so delighted to kick us off with our first panel discussion. And so I'm honored to welcome Vivian Satterfield of Verde, Ashton Simpson of Oregon Walks, Sushmita Poddar of Washington Co-Rising, and Kelly Haines of Worksystems. So thank you all so much for being here today and kicking the morning off with us. So we have a lot of questions we've generated, and I want to be conscientious of time. And so we'll work through it. I've got 8 questions slated. And so I did the math. With 4 people, that's about 2 minutes per person per answer. So something to consider as we hop into it. But it is my role as a moderator to make sure we get through to the juicy stuff. So appreciate you all. And so the first thing I wanted to do was just give you all an opportunity to introduce yourselves as well. So if you could you please just tell us a little bit about yourselves and your role in this work? And the order we go is totally flexible. So I'll let whoever wants to start jump in.
Okay, well, without much delay, good morning, OATS participants. Good morning, fellow panelists. I know each and every single one of you, so it's fabulous to be here with you this morning and share some space on this panel. I'm Vivian Satterfield. My pronouns are she, her, or my name. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Verde as my day job. And I've been actually doing transportation justice advocacy, policy work and organizing for, at this point, about a decade. I'm getting that point where like saying things in 10-year chunks feels a little overwhelming. I used to be the youngest person in the room, and now I'm seeing myself as someone who does have a lot of experience in this role. So a little bit about myself. I moved to Portland in 2008. Originally I'm a city kid, born and raised in Chicago, and that's really when I found my personal connection to transportation. My mother, as an adult immigrant from Taiwan to the United States, was a hotel worker in downtown Chicago. And so early in the mornings when I was not old enough rather to go to school, she would wake me up to take the either bus or the L to go downtown with her. And also because we did not have reliable childcare, would take me to work with her at the hotel. So some of my earliest memories was that pre-dawn kind of walk through the bitter cold in Chicago to accompany my mother on this journey to downtown Chicago and seeing all the changing neighborhoods in that way. So for me, transportation and transportation justice really has always been about access to opportunity. It's not just about getting from place A to B. It's not just about getting to work. It's really that access to opportunity overall. So I'll keep that brief and pass it off. I see Ashton, you look like you're ready to jump right in.
Thank you, Vivian, and thank you, Street Trust, for having me share space with you all. My name is Ashton Simpson. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm the executive director at Oregon Walks. And we're an advocacy organization that we like to say protects everybody's right to roam. That means if you're walking, biking, or using an ADA device to get to where you need to. And we do a lot of things from policy work to working with community through partnered walks and education. So a little bit about my background. I'm from Houston, Texas, originally, like the home of ongoing highway expansion. So it was good to hear Cassie speak on that earlier. So good to hear, because freeway expansion is like a drug. Once you do it once, you're going to continue to do it because you have to, because you add lanes, they clog. So my deal is I grew up with my mom and dad, both Metro Transit drivers down in Houston. So I spent a fairly good chunk of my childhood riding buses. And that really showed me, again, speaking to what Vivian just said, was that access and opportunity. And I know in the community I grew up in, we didn't have a lot of service. Service was slow. There were a lot of lines few and far between. So for me, it was a real key insight into what it is to have a working transit system. And so I went from there, joined the United States Air Force, trained through the Army Corps of Engineers, where I continued to learn and grow. And this time it helped me understand how to plan out a base in terms of transportation and how it should work for folks. And here's the real key, y'all. On any military installation, they're all pedestrian friendly because they're designed that way. Pedestrians have the right of way on bases. So that took me all across the globe, from South Korea to Iannarone, Italy, where I finished out at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane. I moved down to Portland because I wanted to merge what I learned in the military in terms of construction infrastructure and learn how to build social infrastructure within communities while healing communities to build that. So I went to PSU, earned my degree in community development. And, long story short, because I know we got 2 minutes, that's how I ended up here, because it was the perfect marriage of how do we build communities' capacity to get to transit and get to more transportation options, but also how do we impart things that will help build up their quality of life and help them be healthy and vibrant and thriving communities. So thank you again for having me here. And I'll pass it over to Sushmita.
Thank you, Ashton. Thank you, Street Trust, for having me here. And hey, everyone, good morning. My name is Sushmita Poddar, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently occupying the Atfalati lands in Washington County. And let me put it this way, transportation has helped me find purpose, and re-sharing stage with Ashton and Vivian. It's like feeling at home, and hi, Kelly. So it's amazing when I say that transportation has magic, and I'm not saying that literally transportation helped me, because I still can't get access to them, but working on the transportation committee for the LIT, for the Metro panel on getting that together, got us together and helped me find new friends, friends that have similar set of values and principles, and they're activists and advocates, and they care, and they want to be kind. And so after 22 decades of living in Oregon, I felt that I can give back. I can feel that I belong. And yet I know that that sense of belonging is very fleeting, because anybody can, at any given moment, I will be in an unsafe situation. I can't get out of an unsafe situation. The question was, what is your role in this work? So I'm a civic leader. I am a small business owner. I'm a CEO. I am an artist. Have run about, for the last 15 years, I have had 5 careers and 3 businesses and discovered civic leadership. Pardon all the noise, apparently there's a plane flying overhead. And as a civic leader, you will ask, what does a civic leader do? And why this is important to understand, because a civic leader, according to me, understands community, their needs, wants, and desires. They understand the system of government, that power, privilege, the mindset, and the limitations that government claims to have, or the people working in government claim to have. Understanding and acknowledging the past, understanding and living in the present to learn, unlearn, and relearn, advocate, and communicate, and to reimagine a future with a visionary mindset. That's what a civic leader is supposed to do. And I define all of that because that's what community-based organizations do. They are run by civic leaders, and they are doing all of this work to ensure that community is taken care of, and the government that we employ, our tax money employs, is functioning to serve our community. That's all for now. And whom am I supposed to pass it to? That's it?
Kelly.
Got it.
Hi there. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak at this roundtable with some people I know and some that I don't know. It's an honor to be here. My name's Kelly Haines. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I work for Worksystems, which is the local workforce development board that serves Washington and Multnomah counties. We also work closely with Clackamas Workforce Partnership and our colleagues in Southwest Washington to help advance quality jobs in the region. I am the construction sector lead, so I work closely with labor unions, trade associations, pre-apprenticeship programs, registered apprenticeship programs, and community-based organizations to work to get more women and people of color into high quality jobs in the trades. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess I'll say I'll just confess I'm not a transportation expert, so I may be deferring to my colleagues here who know much more about transportation policy, but I'm happy to speak to the workforce equity opportunities, I think, with any of this work that will really advance careers for people, help people feed their families and put a roof over their head. I will say that I grew up in Hillsboro, Oregon. I was born in Portland, and it was like night and day when the MAX train came out to Hillsboro. So it was a big deal to be able to get around, especially as a teenager, and trying to get to Portland, either in the car on Highway 26 or being able to actually take the MAX. So my firsthand experience is that public transit was definitely beneficial for my life and my mobility growing up in the suburbs around Portland. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for those responses. And once again, so happy to have you here. So yeah, we'll dive in. And I also want to celebrate and appreciate that, there's a diverse range of views on and expertise in transportation specifically. And so I think that will actually really contribute to the conversation. And so the first question is, as you all understand it, what is the purpose of a regional transportation system? And how do you apply that understanding to your various work? And I think maybe we just go in the order we went in originally, if that feels good. Okay.
Sure, I can
sweet.
go ahead and kick us
Awesome.
off. Thanks, Andre. So I think to a bit of what I started talking about in my own personal story, I do see that the purpose of our transportation system as an entire region really is that access to opportunity. I live here in Southeast Portland, close to some of our highest crash corridors on 82nd and Powell, and Verde is rooted in the Cully neighborhood of Portland, which is by Portland International Airport and alongside some of our region's most important freight corridors in industrial areas such as Columbia Boulevard. And so while the needs even of these two communities that I'm most intimately familiar with, because I traverse them every single day, and also across our region, there's different areas and points of access to opportunity that people need, whether that's, the various jobs that are located along these corridors. Being so close to the J District is really important to me, and I see people, all across the region coming to get those services, connect with community, and get the groceries that they need from culturally specific places as well. And so, all of these, and of course, the educational centers are located in these areas. So I do see that the purpose of transportation is to connect people, but increasingly due to patterns of gentrification and displacement, due to our land use system, people, may be really far away from where they need to be. So there's also an opportunity for us to think about micromobility and thinking about things that actually are more broader network and hub and spoke system of transportation, not just public transit, but also within our roadways, what that currently is not, how it's not connecting people. And of course, emphasizing the safety of folks as whether they're trying to go just down the street to their corner store, or whether they're trying to, go across the entire region to get to a class or get to their job. So I'll just keep that brief, and it looks like Ashton, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. A great transportation system, especially region-wide, for me is one that not only prioritizes pedestrian movement and regional transportation options, but to that point of connectivity and how close things are. One thing that I'm really looking at as we look at a transportation measure and, well, not measure, but looking at it from a regional standpoint is how close is quality housing to transit, and how close is businesses that support the people that live in those communities, how close is education and green spaces. I think, and coming from my experience out in East County, I live in East Portland, outer East Portland, right near the border. I see the lack of connectivity in terms of north-south connections. And so folks can get to and from. I think the first one we have is line 74 right at 162nd. But we need more. And as more folks, especially in this community, the rising cost of everything, everything's going up, but wages are not. And we have to be mindful of that as we, talk about transportation, because not everybody can afford a car or the things that go into it. And we know that we have to begin to get off of this fossil fuel dependency that we suffer from as a society. And to do that, that means really going into these communities that are low income and where people of color and refugee and immigrants live. And we have to begin to build out exactly what they need in terms of getting that access to opportunities and connectivity. And that starts with even the most basic. I can tell you right now, down Halsey, if you have not been down outer Halsey as of late, there's continuous sidewalk now, at least on the north side, from 102nd to 162nd. And guess what? People are using it. It's not even complete, and people are walking. And that's the goal, is to get folks moving in a different way and changing that behavior. And until you actually put the thing in front of them, they don't understand. Most folks don't understand what we're doing here in this space. They just understand what they experience and see. And until we fully invest into a region-wide transportation system that works for everybody, including those that don't have cars and that are transit dependent, then we do not have a transportation system. We just have a one-way system to do things. So I'll pass it over to Sushmita.
Thank you, Ashton. Oh my, I tried very hard to put it into few words. I mean, what is the purpose of a transportation system? I'm going to try and summarize it. Going from point A to point B, I know, Vivian, but going from point A to point B equals safety, shelter, nutrition, opportunity, justice, equity, equality, community, which is all must be rooted in dignity. Because it's a feeling, do I have a right to nutrition or I don't? Do I need to beg for nutrition or I don't? Do I have a right to feel safe? Not everybody does, apparently. Do I have a right to shelter? No, they don't. Because we have not created those systems. Does somebody have the right to a dignified job? No, they don't, apparently. And I'm saying this quote unquote, however we want to take it. Do we have a right to justice? Not everybody does. Do we have a right to equality? No. Do we have a right to equity? No. Do we have a right to freedom? No. And do we have a right to live in a community, build a new community, feel like we are in a community? No, we don't. People are not allowed their dignity to be just humans. And we don't talk about being human enough or humanity enough. I'm going to focus on one aspect of it, what transportation does. And I didn't realize it for the longest time, because I'll start with this. I'll go back a little bit more. I remember in 2002, being in the Home Depot parking lot on Murray Boulevard in Washington County at 10:30, 11 p.m., having been abandoned there. It was dark and it was scary, and I never thought of it. I was young. I didn't realize, I had never experienced overt racism because I was an immigrant. I'm a light-skinned. I didn't think about my gender, but I didn't know what it feels like to be unsafe in the color of your skin. But it was dark and it was scary, and I was there for about 45 minutes, no phone. I didn't know how to get to anywhere. There was no buses, there's no trains, there is nothing, everything's closed. Why is everything closed? Why don't we have a bustling street? Because of course we don't have any transportation, so who's going to get out at night? Only people with cars. So thankfully, the person returned to pick me up, thankfully. But imagine a decade later, I put my sister in an unsafe situation. She was going to university. I didn't realize. I had stepped away from the unsafe situation, my own unsafe situation, and my younger sister was with me visiting from India. She was studying here, she was going to college. And I remember her coming back at 2 o'clock in the night, and we were just struggling, both of us, we were struggling to make sure everything is okay, everything is safe, and everything, we are able to take care of ourselves, of all three businesses, of ourselves, of our living situation, everything fine, still with privileges. But I remember she would call me up at night that she missed the bus. And I was like, why can't you just get on another bus? Wait, because I had been working 18, 19 hours. I didn't feel safe behind the wheel every day. I didn't feel safe driving the car because I knew I was either going to risk myself or somebody else. Or if she had just arrived at 2 a.m. and I would never sleep till she arrived. And then at 6 a.m. and she asked me, would tell me I missed the bus because she overslept. And I was so tired, I couldn't drive. So I ensured that my baby sister was in a situation of feeling fear and being unsafe. And I realized this after I got on the metro panel for transportation, and they asked about lived experience, because we have defined public safety so narrowly and in fact twisted it. To us, public safety means that it should mean that people feel safe, because if they cannot get out of a situation that is unsafe, or if they can't get to a place that they need to for whatever reason, because of inadequate, visionary, consistent, reliable transportation planning, then all of the consequences That's on us as a society, the leaders and the society. And the only person that is somewhat safe in unsafe situation is one gender, and that too not wholly, based on many factors, including color of skin. So we have found a way to reach the moon and the Mars, and we found the funds, yet we are not able to ensure transportation accessibility to humans, to community, to friends, family, neighbors. We can't give them transit or transportation options and just give it to them and let them use it freely as many times as they want to, because apparently we are giving them something free. No, it's not free. We are paying taxes. That tax money is meant to be used for policies for us. So no, nobody's giving anybody free. Nothing is free in this world. That's it. Thanks. Sorry for the long winded word.
No, thank you.
Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you. So I guess I can just say that, I guess at its core, this is very oversimplified, but the transportation system is meant to help people and goods get around. And I think how that impacts or affects different people is, there's a big spectrum there. And it's critical in the region for those reasons, to help people and goods get around. And so as I understand that in my work, is that, there's economic activity that occurs to maintain, to expand, and to develop the transportation that's ongoing. And this economic activity is, to me, the way I see it, are critical opportunities to advance workforce equity in the region through high road standards and partnerships with community and labor. So as I see it, again, I noticed that there's always opportunities to build or to change or to develop or to expand transportation systems. And all of that to me means work and jobs for people. And who gets that work is very important, because that's work that can, maintain family supporting careers for people in the region. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So I'm doing a little time check. We are approaching halfway. And so I'm going to bounce around a little bit, but I think we'll get into some good stuff. So I appreciate you all very much. So in the panel following this one, we're going to be hearing from officials across the region, all three counties, TriMet and ODOT. And I had a question about how you all imagine the optimal relationship between government agencies and governing bodies and community-based organizations, and even small businesses as well. What does that relationship look like when it's working well? And then I'm also curious how close you feel we are to that optimal relationship, and what maybe needs to change to help us get there. Vivian, please.
Oh, I didn't know if we were sticking in the same order. Okay, that's a great question, Ashton. As you're asking the question, I was really thinking back to the 2020 development of the regional measure at Metro, and a number of us here are in a coalition getting there together. Myself and Verde, Oregon Walks, and others are proud founding members of this regional coalition. That when we started hearing about the idea to put something to the voters in the region asking about transportation, we said that that measure should not just focus on a light rail project and 3 highway projects. It should be much more all-encompassing and get to the components that we heard about from President Peterson's address earlier, to incorporate a vision of housing, a vision of stability, all these interconnected issues. And I remembered a critique that was lobbed against a number of the community-based organizations that were then contracted by Metro to do the deep community engagement work within the communities and with the folks that we have the most expertise in knowing how to engage with, and that we have a base of leadership within. The critique was lobbed that because these organizations would also be supporting the measure, that it was inferred that we were being kind of paid for our support through these community engagement contracts. which is something that at the time I found highly offensive and still do, because I think that this is actually something that community-based organizations have been asking government to recognize our areas of expertise and to start putting the same investment that they give to private firms who contract out. And sometimes that's a boomerang cycle. Those contracts, those firms come right back to us and say, we want to engage with you, with your communities, because y'all are the experts. So let's cut out the middle person, right? And contract directly with us. And so, that's something that I think was very well done. I know that Metro was definitely stepping out as a leader in this region to be able to do that. And I think it actually sets a great example for how community organizations, and it doesn't even have to be a formalized nonprofit, but how there are entities that do have these deep relationships, that do know exactly who to talk to. I think that's one of the ways that Sushmita was activated was through that sort of localized engagement. And there's a variety of ways that Metro did that well, but that's just exactly what my mind went to. And there's, I think, more and more examples within our formalized government entities of how, whether it's through strategic planning processes at PBOT in which there's focus groups, or whether it's through something like a very large regional ballot measure, that our government entities and those who are really truly decision makers and setting the regional priorities and policies can start partnering with and holding at the same level of power the community-based organizations and communities, civic leaders to actualize change.
Thank you.
No, that's really good, Vivian. I want to piggyback just a bit on that, because when Sushmita and I both were on the local investment teams at Metro, I represented East County, or East Portland, or East Multnomah County, excuse me. And it was surprising because I mean, to your point, Vivian, when I started that process, I was at Colas Construction. And then over time, I had moved over to the Rosewood Initiative. And that's when I understood the importance of having CBOs at the table, because I was coming from a place of working at a pretty large firm, well off, they had capacity, they had resources, to coming into a neighborhood where we had to advocate for folks who didn't have that access. And I'll tell you, that's one thing I'm looking forward to in these coming months, is another transportation measure, because it kind of left these communities that we went to bat for back to square zero. And so as we continue this engagement process, it isn't that we just give input when Metro or PBOT or ODOT want something. It's also to help shape policy. So regional transportation plans, the OTP, the Oregon Transportation Plan, and other things, having community-based organizations at the table so that they can help plan the region with the voices of their constituents they serve, because oftentimes those communities are unheard or never heard at all, period. And that's the part that has to change. And I think that, as we continue to move forward, we have some great staff at the staff levels at Metro, PBOT, coming in at ODOT, and it's like things are changing, and I'm looking forward to those changes, but also for the continued engagement. I don't want those big agencies to just show up when they need something. They should also show up to educate folks around what they do, but also, how can folks get involved outside of those key points, town halls, meetings, showing up to public hearings, so that they can also weigh in on things that will ultimately impact them, because again, when we talk about transportation, the most vulnerable users of the system oftentimes, again, are not heard. And it's a great shift. And coming from a place like Houston, I'll tell y'all, sorry, the rest of the house is cooking. Coming from Houston, I've never seen community engagement done this way by any level of government, period. Like, they never showed up in our community when I was growing up. They still don't show up. They just do stuff, and they don't weigh in on, how it's going to impact the community through diversion or other things. And so I'm really thankful that we have the leadership and we're moving in a direction that is more holistic in terms of thinking about who is sitting at the table and what voices are represented there. So I'll pass it over to Sushmita.
Thank you, Ashton. Vivian. Oh my God. So yeah, we by the people. We need to remember that by the people. We have the two aspects to this. People working in the government sector need to learn to listen directly to the voices of the community and the narrative of the community and act on it. Instead of saying that, no, this is what we think is your narrative. This is what we think is what you need. This is what we think you want, and we are going to implement that. Because that is what is happening right now. I think we have created this sense of government that is an empire, you know, and aspects of which that can't be apparently touched, questioned, dismantled, reimagined, redone, or defunded. We have always worked with this mindset, symptom mindset, that's what I call it. We work with a symptom mindset and not a preventive mindset. We stand in front of a tsunami and say, oh, shucks. But we don't put in the work to prevent or predict a tsunami, AKA events stemming from climate crisis, for example. And Mother Earth is getting exhausted from all of the drilling, the invasion, and the bombardment of herself. So where does the government play a role in ensuring that it is by the people? Honor the people, the organizations, individuals, groups, because organizations apparently is a tax exempt status. No, an organization is a group of people who are trying to do good. A community-based organization is a group of people looking out for the community that they represent. An organization can be multiple groups, multiple individuals, again, coming together for the better, So can we get, I think the relation can be better and it can be more effective if we start saying, stop demanding a tax exempt status and focusing on that versus saying, who are the individuals in each individual group representative, who are representatives who can relate, who can connect. Let's build those leaders. Let's create those leaders. Let's find those leaders. Let's get them together and go through trainings and processes and understand what they need and what their history is, and how can we serve them better to make them feel at home, like they belong. Because unless people stop feeling like a foreigner, we're going to keep asking people, where are you from? We keep making them feel like a foreigner. We can't just accept people for where they are and address their needs. We keep othering people. We keep asking people where you're from, but I don't know what the purpose of that is. What is the point? Are we ensuring that where they're from is being honored? No, it is not. It is only to marginalize them. People are not marginalized. Our communities are not marginalized communities. They're not underserved communities. They're not poor communities. They're not invisible communities. All of that is being done. We are marginalizing people. We are invisibilizing people. We are underserving people. We are trivializing people. We are treating people poorly. And we're not connecting them through transportation. All means of accessibility and transportation. Can people get to a park? Can somebody who's not a cishet man get to a park safely? How many people in this who are attending, somebody who's not a cishet man, how many times have you been able to walk without fear? How many times do you get out of a car without fear? How many times do you breathe without fear, whether you are at home or outside of home? We have safe car parking. The government created a thing that said safe car parking, but it required, in my county, it's at a limit of 3 cars. So if it's a 4th car that's escaping an unsafe situation or just needs to sleep because they've had a long day at work, they cannot just park their car and sleep in a safe place. So what is the government doing? Is it listening to community? No, it's not. Is it going to cost anything? No, it's not. The community is paying. It's already paying. Just create policies that are community-centered, not government policy-centered, please. Kelly.
Thank you. This is such a great panel to be a part of. I can just say briefly that some of the work that Worksystems is proud to be a part of is being a member of the Metropolitan Alliance for Workforce Equity and also a member of the Healthy Communities Coalition, which I believe the Street Trust and Verde are also both members of. And the work that that coalition has done to date is really to advance community benefits agreements in the region. And a community benefits agreement is a really great mechanism or model to ensure that community has an equal voice at the table in a negotiation around not just what happens in the construction phase of a project, but also beyond construction and what's in that project. And so I think echoing what other panelists have said about these being public dollars, a community benefits agreement can really ensure that there's optimal and equitable public benefit with those public dollars. And some of the, Broadway corridors where Healthy Communities Coalition was able to negotiate a community benefits agreement for the first time in the region. And I think the hope and excitement is that that can be expanded to other transportation products or projects in the region. To have, I think, what I like about community benefits agreements is that it is a legally enforceable document that community gets a seat at the table to negotiate. And to me, that's real power sharing that doesn't historically happen with government or with public investments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And actually did want to do some direct questions now, if that's all right with you all. Kelly, I recognize that one point of failure, I think, or struggle in the transportation sector is actually connecting with the workforce and workforce development. And I think that's something that a lot of nonprofit or community-based organizations are trying to strengthen. Do you have any models or advice on how we can continue to strengthen those relationships moving forward?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I will say that specifically Metro, along with the City of Portland and Multnomah County, just successfully negotiated a regional workforce equity agreement. Most of those projects for those three public agencies will be applied to projects 5 million and above. And that was successfully negotiated with labor unions and with community-based organizations. And it's a pretty historic development actually for the region. We are inviting ODOT to also sign on and TriMet and others because we see it as one of those agreements that will advance true workforce development opportunities for women and people of color in the construction trades. So I see that as a very exciting development and would encourage anybody to, reach out if you have questions. But essentially, there's very clear mechanisms that create, goals and targets for apprentices, for journey level workers across the trades, across the contractors, all working on the projects. And partners with registered pre-apprenticeship programs and community-based organizations to develop that pipeline of diverse workers getting onto those projects. There are models like that across the country and very impressive outcomes of even here locally, when an agreement like that is developed, the goals and targets are actually exceeded. So it's not just a ceiling, but a floor to actually ensure real opportunity for our community to get to earn a living and have a credential. The other thing I'll say really briefly is that the Department of Transportation, the US Department of Transportation just signed in February an MOU with the Department of Labor. And that MOU does focus on quality job standards and workforce equity, including training around improving the culture of the job sites. And so I would encourage anybody to look up that MOU. It's very impressive, signed by the Secretary of Labor and the Secretary of Transportation. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you so much for that. And I think I'll direct this at Vivian. as you've probably experienced, and all of you in this room, it feels like we're sort of in an era of equity work. And so my question for you, Vivian, is how confident are you about this era and the work that's being done, and whether or not it's going to have an actual impact down the road?
That's a good question. I think that starting actually today, hearing, Irene, Marion, and, knowing her track record of success at the Portland Bureau of Transportation, and now representing, so many of her colleagues and our viewpoints in our community and representing our work at the USDOT gives me a lot of confidence. And not to rest this all on Irene's shoulders, although she's able to accomplish anything she puts her mind to, I do know this, is that we're elevating more and more leaders to positions of influence and power, in the spaces where change can and does happen. So I do think that, I don't know if confidence is necessarily the word I have. I have a lot of, my optimism has grown significantly. I'm actually not an optimist by nature. So that's a point of vulnerability for me to be like, I feel optimistic about it, but I really do. And I think that more and more I'm also seeing a grounding in the analysis, a grounding in data. That work is being respected. There's a lot of researchers in this space. I mean, shout out to the good folks at Trek at Portland State University, but there's also researchers, all across the country who are really dedicated, such as in PolicyLink, to this connection between equity and policy that's grounded in community voice, that's grounded in both qualitative and quantitative research, and that we're developing leaders in those spaces. So I think the key is still, though, about the politics of the space, because you can be as right as you want on paper, but you also have to change the narrative. You also have to shift the minds and hearts of decision makers as well. And so my optimism is growing, and I really hope to see the fruits of that come to fruition for our communities.
Awesome. I really appreciate that response. Ashton, I'm going to direct this one at you. And it's regarding this idea that, first and foremost, everyone is a pedestrian, but it being perhaps a little bit more challenging to catalyze across that identity. Like cyclists, you can wrangle them at a bar or something and say, hey, we're going to go on a bike ride. Like, this is our activity. Can you talk a little bit about how you move towards people really identifying as pedestrians, even drivers as well?
Absolutely. I think it, number one, it starts with what Vivian was alluding to, trust. You got to build trust with people. And part of that trust is knowing that it's safe, to Sushmita's point earlier. Right now, I think there's issues, especially in outer East County, around safety and moving around. I like to think of transportation as everything, everywhere, all at once. And so you think about how it just moves through the neighborhood here in East County. We just lost a youth to gun violence. People are not going to get out walking on the streets if they know people are actively shooting in the streets. We see constant speeding. I've witnessed, at least twice in this neighborhood three times actually, Stark, Gleason, Outer Stark, Outer Gleason, and then also in Brazil near my kid's school, where folks are driving erratically and speeding. And this is why we have such high numbers of fatalities. And we know a number of those fatalities are folks that are houseless, but those are two separate issues. We need to create an ecosystem for folks within that space of being houseless. But on the flip side, there has to be some accountability for those folks who, because speeding is an individual choice. Folks who speed up and down roads, who lose control, who drive erratically like that, for me, is an individual choice. You chose to press the pedal and go faster. Like, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. So if we really want people to think in a way of being a pedestrian, I think it starts by making the streets safer and complete, meaning better lighting. Folks need to have lighting as they move around, especially, I like to walk and run at night, but as a Black man in East Portland, I'm not going to do that. for a number of reasons. You know, we need to have safe crossings. We need to have bus shelters for folks. I think one thing that often gets left out in complete streets is street trees. Because on those heat dome days and when it's really hot, there's no point of walking on sidewalks that are 150 degrees when it's 120 outside. So, you know, thinking about that, but ultimately everybody is a pedestrian. I don't think they, you know, to your point, André, I don't think they realize that, because the moment you step off of your bike, get out of your vehicle, whatever, when you're on foot, whether it's like going 100 feet or you're walking a few blocks, you're still a pedestrian. And I think once we get into that mindset of like, this is safe and it's convenient and I don't need to drive my car and I can take transit or I can ride my bike, I think ultimately that's when folks will start to realize, hey, I'm a pedestrian. And I've had the opportunity, you know, in my lifetime to go live abroad. I lived in Europe for about 4.5 years. And so I got the chance to, you know, go see some of the countries where, you know, cycling is the way people move around, and you might get clipped by a bike because, you know, folks are just cycling, and you don't know as a pedestrian moving in that space what to do. But I've also lived in transit dependent countries like South Korea, where that's all I did was take the train. And I considered myself like the ultimate pedestrian during those times because that's what everybody did. And, you know, I was thankful that I didn't have to have a car when I was living there. So, you know, going back to it all just makes the streets safer, make them convenient, make them attractive to folks, because I think part of it too is aesthetics. When you look at a road and you look at design and some of the culture you can lift up in communities that live there and experience their space, that spatial area like that, that's how we start to pull folks in and saying, hey, let's go walk here. It's interesting here. And I think about, I know, you know, not a lot of Black folks live there anymore, but like over by Radio Room, Alberta, they have all these art installations of Black folks who used to live there, or they talk about things. And I often go and walk just to be a part of it and to kind of feel what used to be there. But then ultimately, again, there's always people walking in that neighborhood because it's made to walk. And so until we can get every neighborhood to feel that way, I think that's when people will start to change.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. And Sushmita, I did have a question. As a business owner, a lot of times community-based organizations that deal with transportation issues often find points of tension between businesses and you know, creative transportation options. For a lot of businesses, parking is so critical. And so I was wondering if you could advise us, give us perhaps some guidance on strategies to engage with small businesses.
André, I'm going to tell you a very simple thing. Nobody understands small business. We are still in our heads living with the mindset that small business means factories of cheap labor, exploited cheap labor. Small business, according to United States Small Business Association, is 500 employees. I want to know which 500 employees person running that kind of payroll is a small business. They have to have a whole team, a human resources team. They have to have accountants, they have to have payroll, they have to have all sorts of formal structure in place for small business. So what is small business? Small businesses, micro businesses, cultural businesses, incubators, all of them are completely being invisibilized because of the name small business. It's like how we define public safety, and that's what it is. We don't talk about what a small business really is and who are the owners of small businesses. A lot of times, small business owners barely make minimum wage or even less. They're doing all of the work, that working 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours, don't have access to healthcare, don't have access to, if they're struggling to pay rent, there is no support. If they're struggling to pay for food, there's no support. If they're trying to get to their workplace as a small business owner, there is no support. If they're small businesses at home, apparently they don't deserve support. So small businesses, we are saying that if they are in neighborhoods, people are creating culture, they're creating community, they're doing all of that. But because we have no transportation in my county, in Washington County, there is no transportation. In Clackamas County, there is no transportation. So all of the small businesses in these two counties particularly do not deserve any support, do not have any support. People need to start understanding what a small business is. And we saw that during the pandemic. We saw that the government did not, when they took out loans, by the way, quote unquote loans and programs and grants, they did not consider that. Nobody even understood what small business is. They did use our shoulder and fired guns. They used our shoulders and used guns like ammunition, like we want to support small businesses, but did they? No. So we don't have access to community members that can support us. So we are not just supposed to be doing good in our, I'm going to use myself as an example. If I have a specialization, I'm not supposed to become good and better and the best at what I do. I'm supposed to also know marketing, human resources, management, accounting, X, Y, Z, all of that stuff, and figure out how to get people to my business. So I cannot ever exceed. So there is no opportunity for me to ever be in the newspaper as CEO. I have run my business for 15 years. I'll give you some numbers to make you understand. I have held 30,000 hands or more and painted henna on them. I have designed more than 10,000 outfits. 10,000 people somewhere in our state and outside are wearing my creation. Somewhere more than 3,000 people in the state of Oregon, I have taught dance to. A few thousand people have attended the events that I have organized. So now think about it. Where did all of that go? Where did all of that vanish? Why don't people know? Why don't people care? Because they're just doing something for one moment. It's not part of their normal existence. Small businesses are not part of their normal existence. We don't just have places to go to with easy transportation to go visit these businesses. They have to have a reason to visit a specialty store. They cannot just browse. Washington County, Cornelius Pass Road, an arterial road north and south connecting TV Highway, Highway 10, all the way to US 13-mile stretch, has zero public transportation. Thousands of people live along the road. Thousands of people use the drive on that road. There's Intel, there's Nike, that it connects everybody, and there is no public transportation. So all of the businesses along that road, small businesses, have zero access to the larger community. My county particularly connects Sherwood, Tualatin, Tigard, Westland, Lake Oswego to North Plains, Banks, Gaston, Cornelius, Forest Grove, Hillsborough, Beaverton, Cedar Hills. Nothing is connected. The tragedy of Washington County is the fragmentation and the lack of connectedness because we do not have transportation. So people can say that they're supporting small business. There is no intention of supporting small business because we are not connecting people. We are not connecting community to the businesses that are of the community. I hope that makes sense. And if you need any more clarification, it almost, André, it feels like life doesn't have to be a daily battle, but we are ensuring that there is a battle. While we are also, there is a battle being waged from thousands of years for energy, for oil. People are killing one another, bombarding one another around the world, battling it out to have power over oil for transportation. No, it's just a power play. So how do we come up with more alternatives and more options? And one thing I want to highlight what Ashton was mentioned, and which if we don't have transportation, we just don't have transportation in the county. How are children supposed to get to places? How are people with disabilities and accessibility needs supposed to get to places? How are people supposed to go out for a walk? We don't have bus stops. We don't have shelter. Oregon, it rains for 8 months. And then we have now sun that kills us. And when you want to take shelter, if you're outside for a moment, if you're outside, how do you take shelter when it's raining? So we want to address climate change, but we don't want to give options of any kind or the infrastructure. So if it's raining, how is somebody supposed to cycle? People are forced into cars. And when you are in your car and you're not walking and you're not connecting, how are you going to build community? Because you just want to get from one place, point A to point B, and that's all it is. Let's create that in-between part. That's what we are missing. It's not about A, it's not about B, to bring it back all the way to Vivian. It's about an opportunity to connect, build community, feel safe, feel that you deserve all of those opportunities that are possibilities to thrive and not just survive. I hope that
Appreciate
covered
that. Thank you. So yeah, we're running out of time. So I just quickly wanted to follow up with a final question, maybe 30 seconds each. We've been talking about a lot of the challenges we're experiencing, but I'm excited about for our region transportation's future.
I'll jump in real quick. I'm excited about the next iteration of our transportation measure. I know that it's needed. I know that we need to get what we've talked about today, get everybody at the table, from community groups, businesses, labor groups, unions, so that we can all understand how this transportation measure will shape our region for the coming years. So that means there needs to be a level of understanding that we need to create a system that's going to move people efficiently, but also get them to work. Because I can tell you right now, there's a lot of electricians that want to get out and need to get out to Intel as they grow and expand, but there isn't great service to get there for them to do that. So, thinking about that and having those folks at the table so that we can really map out what needs to happen and then put it on a ballot and go to the table with community, with our voters, and say, hey, we got to pass this so that you can benefit and everybody else between can as well.
I can go next. I'm always excited by youth advocacy and youth activism. So let's get Youth Pass regionally now already. It's been over 20 years. Let's make it happen. Thank you all, the young people who continue to stand up and do this work. It is benefiting not just everyone, but also future generations. I'm excited about the statewide conversation around the transportation needs of rural communities, connecting that with the experiences of folks with disabilities all across the state, also the needs of urban areas. Let's look to unlock resources at the statewide level to finally sustainably fund transportation revenue. I'm excited about the power building that's happening around there. I'm also excited, a little bit nervous about these upcoming elections. Let's finally get a transportation expert in the governor's office who can help coordinate all these regions and all these efforts and continue to lift up dynamic, amazing, smart leaders that are homegrown to those levels of government, including the federal government.
I can quickly say I'm excited about, I think, the common ground of finding, ways to expand or develop the transportation system and improve the access and multimodal features that also creates work. And so I think, when I talk to labor leaders and others, they're just interested in doing high quality work, whether it's building sidewalks or bike lanes or light rail. All of those things are work created, and so how we can work together to ensure that future is equitable is what I'm excited about. Thank you.
Our state is beautiful. I am excited about a vision. It's a dream that I can get on and off transit. And transportation, use transportation to get around. I'm excited that people can truly enjoy the beauty of our state because they have options. They can just experience the outdoors, they can experience exhilaration and freedom. I've had a chance to drive around my state. And now I understand that I come from a place of privilege to be able to do that. And people have not been able to. So I'm excited about that dream that I can just go from one end to the other end quickly because I just want to. I just want to meet my friend across the city, and I don't have to travel for 3 hours. I'm excited about the fact that with somebody living with health condition, that when I call a friend at 2 a.m, they are able to just come to me because they can't drive. So they can just get on the transportation and come to me quickly without having to spend all of their savings on getting to me. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about people, reaching people and getting to where they need to get to for whatever reason.
And I'm excited about all the wonderful leaders we have in our region. So I appreciate you all very, very much. Thank you for taking the time this morning. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Sarah. Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Vivian, Sushmita, Ashton, Kelly, and André for your moderation, for sharing your perspectives. It was really important to hear from you following President Peterson's remarks so that we could have a discussion in context. As many of you pointed out, sometimes there's a vast divide between our aspirations, our policies and plans on paper, and how that plays out in our lived experience. So I am going to look and make sure that everyone is here for our next panel. Why don't, if you need to take a minute, for those of you who've been on here, we'll get started in just 2 to 3 minutes. I want to make sure that everyone who's scheduled to speak on this next panel is here and ready to participate. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Sarah Iannarone. I'm Executive Director of the Street Trust, and you are attending the 11th Annual Oregon Active Transportation Summit. We've heard this morning from Irene Marion of USDOT. We heard from Cassie Wilson of Sunrise Rural Oregon and the Street Trust. We heard from Metro President Lynn Peterson, who shared her vision for our region's transportation future. And then we just heard from a roundtable of community leaders from across our region sharing their understanding, not just of the vision, but the reality on the ground as they're living our transportation system day to day. For our next panel, we will be hearing from officials who will respond not only to those community voices and to that larger vision as set out by President Peterson, but how they plan to work with community and what they need from you to succeed. You know, as Sushmita in the previous panel so carefully pointed out, that we are government and government is us, and that our leaders working with the community and not necessarily in opposition to, but amplifying the voices. They need our help. They need our support. They need us behind them too. So what can we bring behind them? And this discussion is important. And I am so excited that we have an esteemed panel, and we are going to have one person joining us last minute as she logs in. Karen Criswell from ODOT is making her way in from another meeting, but I will introduce the folks that I have here today. We are so excited to have Jackie Yerby, a board member of the Street Trust, moderating for us today. I've known Jackie for some time now, and I couldn't be more pleased by the fact that she is here with us today. We also have Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson. Commissioner Peterson has done a lot of work in transportation. Oh, I'm going to have you mute there, Karen. Commissioner Vega Peterson has done a lot of work in transportation. We're very excited to have her here with us today. We have Washington County Commissioner Nafisa Fye, who we've also seen working a lot in the transportation space. She shows up on a lot of committees where the Street Trust is at, and we're excited to have her here. And Libra Ford, North Clackamas County School Board member, who we've seen in various roles around our region. So I'm excited to see the diverse perspectives that she's going to bring to this conversation. And then we also have with us JC Venata from TriMet and Karen Criswell from ODOT. And I'm excited because we don't always have the opportunity to hear from such a diverse range of voices in a single morning. But what I'm hoping we can accomplish by the end of this is having some key themes, some highlights, some shared understanding as we move into our breakout sessions through the rest of the conference and future plenaries where we're going forward on a shared note. And so Jackie, from there, I'll let you take it. And thank you to all of our esteemed panelists for being here with us today. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. I guess it's still morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to the panelists for being here and for the 93 attendees that I can see. And thanks for rolling with us as we continue to operate in this virtual space as we figure out what kind of connection, what it means to be connected to each other kind of in this space, as well as like out in the world. I'm Jackie Yerby. I'm super honored to be a Street Trust board member. I've been a longtime fan and supporter, sometime bicycle commuter, although hard to bike, when your office is in your dining room or you're upstairs. Glad to be among friends in this group, some friends on this panel, certainly folks I have long admired. So let's get going. And I don't know if you had a chance to hear Metro President Lynn Peterson's remarks or other folks speaking. I actually had to take a meeting during the last session, so I didn't catch it all, but really curious to hear from you kind of what you have heard from, if you've been able to participate, what you've heard from others so far, and kind of how that informs how you think of our transportation system. So I guess I will start with that. And if you weren't able to participate, totally understand. Again, just as you introduce yourself, kind of what do you see as the purpose of our transportation system? How does equity factor into it? And how do you bring that understanding to your role? Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson, I will start with you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And I have been able to attend most of this morning. I had to, kind of jump out to do a couple other work things, but it's been so amazing to be here. So thank you, Street Trust, for putting this together and bringing together such amazing folks. So I'm Jessica Vega Peterson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Multnomah County Commissioner, and I sit at a lot of different transportation tables around the region, JPAC, ODOT Act, TriMet, committees, a lot of different things. And so I've had this experience for the past few years of really getting into the weeds on a lot of transportation things. But, I come at this, or I got involved and engaged in this work really for different reasons. One was the work that I did in the legislature on climate. I was the person who championed the Clean Fuels Bill in the legislature, which was about getting more carbon neutral fuels required in our state. And that led me to be engaging on different transportation things at the state level. But I also am a longtime resident of East Portland. And I, came at this work really in a very personal way on how this place where we've lived for the last 16 years has not had the investments that other places that I've lived in Portland, other places around the region have had. And, when we moved here and I had my kids, I got so mad because I couldn't walk around the block with them in the stroller without having to go into the streets because we didn't have connected sidewalks. And I mean, to this day, we have people who just speed through the streets of East Portland and cause deaths. I mean, we heard Ashton talk about that earlier, just really the impact on pedestrians. And so, when you ask the question about where I come from and how I view transportation is really about making sure that people can be connected in real ways in real lives. I mean, a lot of us stayed home a lot during COVID, and the transportation system, whether you're walking, whether you're biking, whether you're rolling, whether you're taking transit, or whether you're using our car, it's about how we connect with other people in real lives. And we have to make sure that it can work for everybody. So, we have to be prioritizing people. We have to especially be prioritizing people who don't have options to get to the places that they need to go without the public investment in our transportation system that makes it possible in all of the ways and the modes that they need. And especially, looking at it at the intersection of both climate change, safety, and equity, and making those kinds of investments. So and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fye.
Hi, Jackie. Can you hear me?
Yes, so good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been a while. Thank you for hosting and moderating this event, and thank you to Street Trust for inviting me to be here. My name is Nafisa Faye. I am Washington County Commissioner. I was elected in 2020 and was sworn in 2021. So it's been a new days for a while, for the past year and a half, for Washington County to be the first to the person of color to ever be elected on the board of Washington County. We're one of the most diverse county in Oregon, yet we're here to have the first still. But I'm honored to be here. And when I ran, I did a lot of door knocking and talked to a lot of our constituents. And one of the things that I heard was, we may not know what a county commissioner do, but I really care about my streets and I care about the congestion that I have to suffer through every day. What are you going to do? How are you going to mitigate congestion? So I walked in, hearing with those messages to when I was sworn in to have a role in transportation, not only regionally, but especially for Washington County, and to really center equity. That was my goal for transportation. How do we center equity in transportation and really have just those easy conversations and easy questions around, if we have two areas that are unincorporated, both sides, there's no cities involved. The parent for that neighborhood or that area is the county. Why is one street better than the other? Why are some able to go through where they're going through with no struggle, just super ease, and in fact get to enjoy and have the aesthetic piece to go along with those roads. But other areas are suffering. To go to work, you have to put your life in danger. To go to church, you have to put your life in danger just to cross the streets and to get to where you're going. So I really, my intention walking into transportation conversations and to have a role in transportation was just to ask those easy questions and to say, how is this fair? And to really reprioritize around how we distribute resources and center historically marginalized communities when we talk about transportation. So I've been really excited, and this is the importance of having the right people be elected. If I wouldn't have this role, if it wasn't for Catherine Harrington, putting her vote and insisting that she exercises her ability to appoint who sits from Washington County to JPAC. So I really couldn't emphasize that we need to elect the right people to really have any wins around transportation or climate change, because then we get to the right people at these conversations. So I'm really excited to be here this morning and look forward to this conversation, and I'm excited to be part of this great host. And I've heard Libra speak before, and she's amazing. So I'll stop right there. I've heard the rest of you speak too. You all are amazing, but I think a little fangirling Libra.
I will join you in your fangirling. Libra Ford, why don't you go next?
Excellent, man. That's quite the introduction, Commissioner Fye. I fangirl over you all the time, so I appreciate the give back. Thank you. So I first want to say thank you guys. I mean, I think we all share in respecting the space that you guys have given us to talk about very important things. So the question about transportation of purpose, in my mind, transportation's purpose is it's a vital structure, right? It helps us connect people. It helps us have access to resources and things and healthcare and all the things that make your livability pleasant and desirable. And so transportation is vital, and the structures and the system around that are important. And that's where equity, your question about equity and transportation are important, because without those structures and systems having an equity lens to them that think about all people and all things associated and the differences related to those structures that we need to think about, then we really cause more harm. And so we have to make sure that we're including that in there. Then your question about the role of me in transportation. Personally, when I think about it, we often talk about what we've seen as being problematic, which is the historical view of transportation. Very important to review historical data because that's how you make good decisions. But we also, to me, my role is to be a future thinker because these systems and these structures have to exist for other people in the future that we may not ever see. And so how do we think about that in ways that are not harmful to our daily lives today and the future? How do we become innovative in those ways? To me, that is my role as a leader in this area. In particular, as a school board chair, I think heavily about our kids and how they're accessing school. But that's really what it's about. We're vital structures, vital systems, connectivity, bringing everything together. And how do we make that work in a way that's less harmful for all today and tomorrow?
Thank you so much, Libra. I love what you said about being a future thinker. Definitely want to kind of bring that back into this conversation as we go forward. But JC Vanata from TriMet, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you so much, Jackie. And I really want to say thank you to Sarah and the Street Trust for including TriMet in this conversation. I have to tell you, just the energy of so many like-minded people on the conference that I've witnessed is just amazing. And it feels good that so many people care about transportation in this region. And I really, really want to thank all of you, the folks on the previous panels. So thank you. You know, it's really interesting because Commissioner Peterson mentioned it, Commissioner Fye mentioned it, the whole notion of access to our transportation system is so vital because we know at TriMet that everyone who uses transit, and Ashton Simpson in the earlier panel said it best that, you know, whether you walk or roll to a stop, you're a pedestrian first to access transit. And so, you know, so many conversations have talked about sidewalks as being such an integral part in using transit. So I really, really appreciate those comments. One of the things I have also, you know, the climate challenge has really came to the forefront, hasn't it? And for us at TriMet, I think one of the things that we see ourselves as being part of the solution. And I know that some of you know this on the call because you're transportation nerds like me, but that last year alone, we cut our carbon footprint by 60% by using renewable diesel, and then using renewable electricity from PGE and Pacific Power. So we are part of the solution. And I think that that's important when we think about the things that we can do. I share Commissioner Peterson's energy for the future and her focus on, you know, improving our transportation system. I think it's incredibly exciting. And I think we need all of the voices in our community, much like all of those that are on the virtual seminar right now and those that were on the previous one. And it'll take all of us to make those changes. I would just note that we're in a really interesting time right now coming out of the pandemic. And I hope we're coming out of the pandemic because I think that we're all ready for it. But, you know, our community has changed. The demographics have changed. People have moved. People's travel patterns have changed. And I think we're doing a lot of work at TriMet to understand that. We have a comprehensive service analysis underway called Forward Together. And it's really understanding more about the transportation needs of our community. And really, how can we in the next months and years start to address some of those low-hanging fruit while we plan for some of the bigger projects? And I think that, you know, as we look at our region and we look at the I-5 bridge, or we look at Southwest Corridor, or some of these other things, we as a community can still do big things. We have it in us. And it's amazing how much our jurisdictional partners collaborate, as well as how much the community is really listened to as we develop those big projects. And so I can't tell you how excited I am for the transportation future in our region. And it's going to take all of us to achieve what we really want to get out of it. So thank you so very, very much. I would just say one last note. My role here at TriMet is to listen to our community. and then deliver on what the community needs. And I'm really one of those people who likes to get things done. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, JC. Karen Criswell from ODOT.
Good morning, everyone, and so sorry to have arrived late. The virtual participation has its challenges. I had a little computer crash, and anyways, that aside, I'm super excited to be here with this really esteemed panel this morning, and thank you to Sarah again and Street Trust for inviting me. And I think that I could start by saying that transportation really is one of the most basic services that government provides. When it is working well, people have better access to jobs, to social opportunities, recreational activities, daily life. When it's not working well, it makes every aspect of daily life harder, especially for those who are already marginalized and excluded. My job as the Public Transportation Division Administrator for ODOT, which includes public and active transportation, Transportation Options Program, and the state's passenger rail program. And I have to explain that because the public transportation umbrella is much larger than just transit for ODOT. My job is to help make sure that all Oregonians have safe, equitable, and climate-friendly access to a multimodal transportation system. It's not just about the people who are driving in their single occupancy vehicles. It's about everyone across the state, regardless of age and ability, being able to access that system. ODOT has its roots in getting Oregon out of the mud. You didn't see my gesture, but I did a yeehaw gesture right there with that. And at the time that the agency was stood up, that was a very basic, important, fundamental need. But as the population of Oregon has grown, as people have changed what their transportation choices are, whether you have a car or don't have a car, you should be able to get to wherever you need to go on a daily basis, regardless of your car status. And we have significant gaps in our transportation system. People don't care whose road they are walking or biking on or crossing to get to a transit stop. They just want to be able to do that, to have it be safe, to have it be accessible, to have it work for them when they need it. And so my role here at ODOT is to help continue the agency's change. I kind of look at us as a big ship at times, and it's really hard to turn certain big ships, but I see us making progress, and that shows up in some of the commission's decisions, which I hope I get to talk about a little bit later. But my job is also within the programs that run through my division, which we have over 300 million in funding, where we are able to make the policy and investment choices related to bike, ped, and transit, that we're able to say, among the places that we're making those choices, how are we centering equity to make sure that we are serving the areas with the greatest needs first and prioritizing those areas. So how do we look at the flexibility we have within those programs? And we're also making some, I think, on the verge of making some really important changes in how we do the work and how we engage communities. Oftentimes we have, and historically, in part because of staffing levels, we've really relied on our subrecipients, our funding subrecipients, whether it's transportation options agencies, metro cities, to really have that local community engagement, to know best what your communities need. But then we've also been realizing under Vice Chair Simpson's recent leadership with the Innovative Mobility Program, really that push for us to be more directly engaged, to build those relationships, to be less transactional, and to really get more hands on the ground, so to speak. So with that, I'll stop because I'm pretty excited about this topic too and some of these changes, but creating space. Okay, the end. Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's as somebody who has worked at the intersection of equity and so many issues over the last few years, it's so great to hear all of you talk about centering your work in equity. And I know how hard that is. And so Commissioner Fye, when you said easy questions, I was wondering if you had like easy with an air quotes or if it felt truly easy. So just thinking in terms of what you may have heard throughout the morning, as well as just other conversations that you've been in. What makes you feel optimistic about transportation in our region? And we'll go in the same order that we did before. So Commissioner Vega Peterson, what makes you feel optimistic?
I think what makes me feel optimistic, there's a couple of things. I mean, one of those is that I think that there's a really good understanding in our region about the impact that transportation actually has on people's lives to move us forward on things like equity and things like climate change, and people are engaged in that work. Like, I was so inspired earlier today when we were hearing about like the work that's been happening, you know, on climate change from the youth, and really like, and how transportation is like such a big part of what they're fighting for on that front. And hearing from Irene about the fact that we have the federal government who like has understanding about equity and transportation, and then we had, you know, President Peterson from Metro who was talking about this from the regional perspective, and then on the panel, like at every level, we have people who really understand the importance of the transportation system in driving equity, in driving safety, in driving changes around on what's happening with our climate. And so that makes me excited. That makes me really optimistic about like, we can make the changes we need. We can invest in our transportation systems, and we can do it in the right way because we have that understanding across all different jurisdictions, all different potential funding sources, and we just need to keep that drumbeat up. And you know, and I will have to say things that, you know, the same thing about the folks who are on this panel with me today. Like many of them I've worked with on transportation and other issues, and I'm just really proud to be here and talking about this. So those things make me optimistic, and I am also optimistic about our chance for another bite at the apple with a regional transportation investment plan for our region. That is something that we have to be committed to. We have projects, we have areas of this region that absolutely need that investment. And I was part of the group that I actually was the co-leader of the Regional Advisory Council that put together a package of what that could look like when it was on the ballot last time. And that was fantastic work, and it was deep work with community. And we need to like, we can't lose that, right? We have to continue to take that work forward and really fight for those kinds of investments, because our region is going to grow. Like our needs for investment in transportation is going to continue. And what happened federally with the bipartisan infrastructure package was fantastic, but that still doesn't, you know, there's so much backlogs and maintenance and things that like, it's only going to go so far. We still need to show that we are committed to this region. We're committed to investing in transportation in a way that addresses the transportation needs of everyone, no matter where they live in the region, so that they can get to the place where they need to. And we're going to do it in a smart way that really focuses on the impacts on climate change, on safety and equity.
Thank you, Commissioner Vega Peterson. Commissioner Fye, what makes you optimistic?
Ditto everything Commissioner Vega Peterson said. I 100% agree, and that's what really excites me and keeps me going, and every morning be part of this conversation around transportation. And then also, you know, really electing people that bring the lived experience. I think the political spectrum in Washington County, or not just Washington County, in Oregon actually, is changing, and really electing people that bring that lived experience. It's what excites me and what gives me hope that things can be different tomorrow and the day after. You know, now we have people like myself who come from poverty who are in part of this political debates and conversations at the state level. Same, you know, we have renters who are legislators. We have people who not long ago were taking the bus. You know, they might not be taking the bus all the way to Salem, but they know somebody who takes the bus all the way to Salem. And I think that's really what changes these policy decisions and changes the trajectory for a lot of people, especially marginalized communities. So I really wanted just to ditto everything Commissioner Vega Peterson said, and then add on to that the power of the lived experience, making sure people who are making decisions can resonate what's like to to cross the street, as unsafe street, to just catch your bus to your 9 o'clock work shift. And when we do have that is when we can change the policy and the narrative and how we talk about. Sometimes, you know, when I hear political conversations around policy, there's a lack of respect and dignity. And I think when you have people with the lived experience, you center dignity and respect in how you approach and how you solve that problem. So I would say electing and getting candidates out there that bring that lived experience, especially when it comes to transportation, and can center, you know, and when I meant easy questions, not easy questions, but in the political sense, to say, you know, why are certain people who are unincorporated within this area have these beautiful roads where unincorporated, the other side of it, have terrible roads. But then when you look at the demographics of, you know, when you disaggregate that data, you see the haves and the have-nots. And just ask that easy question, is this really fair? That's an easy question. It might not be an easy answer or easy to answer that question. How we get to it, it's kind of messy, because then you have to dissect the race and the socioeconomic, and it's never a comfortable conversation to talk about socioeconomics and racial dynamics. But that's a really easy question to say, is it fair that people who live this unincorporated area have fancy roads and can get to where they want to go, and then the people who are here, who we should be helping, government should be helping most of, because we have more responsibility and a moral obligation to also help these folks, yet they are suffering and putting their life in danger. So that's what I meant, easy question, not necessarily it's easy to put your life in danger to just get to your church, or just to get to your Safeway or grocery store you're going to, or just to get to your shift so that you can pay rent that month. It's not that easy, but the question of, is that really fair, is a really easy question. And I hope we address and bring the conversation to everyday ordinary citizens, what they're doing. They're taking the bus, they're driving their cars, some are walking, you know, and some are on their other means to get to where they want to go. So, and how do we make that road safe? And just like Commissioner Vega Peterson, I sit on JPAC, and every month we talk about the people that lost their lives on the roads for safety reasons. And that's really heartbreaking, to start your 7:30 in the morning with a dose of people that lost, that could have been, you know, all politicians could have mitigated those deaths. So I'm in this job to really mitigate death and to push safety forward with you all. So I'll end right there. I think I'm rambling.
Thank you, Commissioner Fye. Libra, how about you?
Yeah, this is, optimism is a choice, right? And I think I choose it because of people, because of passion, and because of purpose. So the people that we serve in our many different capacities, even as non-elective individual, that we have people serving us in the realm of transportation, education, they give me hope, because they're really passionate about this work. I didn't get to hear everything this morning, but when I did jump on, you hear the passion in their voice and then in their approach to the work. So those three things are really important to me, as well as I live by a standard. I say it all the time. There are people who did this for us and they did not know our names. And though we have so much work to do, and what we have right now is not the answer to everything that we need and will need in the future. We all have that opportunity to do it for others and not know their name. And that gives me hope, because I stand very clear and appreciative of all those that have done the work. And so I just hope to deliver a little bit of that passion for people, a little bit of that purpose around transportation and support for our community, so that the future can also be safe, sound, and productive.
Thank you so much. JC, how about you?
Thank you, and I've loved all those answers. I think I want to just note what Commissioner Vega Peterson had noted, that so many people around this table and other tables throughout our region are understanding and valuing what transit brings to the table. And I think for so many people, I see opportunity and optimism everywhere when I think about that, because there's so many people who are coming together around that very subject. And, you know, we know the benefits of transit to climate change, right? So many of us do, but it also brings access to so many people. And as I know many of you know, Gresham Mayor Travis Stovall, but he always likes to say, transit helps bring people from, lift people from poverty to prosperity. And I really love that, because giving access to so many people can do so much for our region, for the health of people, for our economy. And I think that having so many people around the tables acknowledge the value that transit brings is just so crucial to our region as it grows, more people moving here. And so that's why it just gives me a lot of optimism, because there's so many opportunities. When you think of all these people bringing this same view to the table, I think that people are thinking differently. And I think that that brings a lot of optimism for me and for others to this conversation.
Thank you. I got to say, I love hearing about all this optimism. It's a great way to start, for me, certainly, to start my week. Karen, how about you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to join the earlier sessions, but I read the notes as I was popping in, and I do want to say, this will probably sound a little odd, but I really appreciate, and what gives me optimism is the advocacy that I'm seeing recently. And I think many of you are following what the Oregon Transportation Commission was doing in terms of the flexible $412 million in flexible federal funds that are coming to Oregon through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And part of what I saw during the public process for that allocation decision was just a massive uprising in advocacy and voices testifying to the commission, sending letters to the commission. And I think that advocacy part of, as a result of that, public and active transportation was allocated $90 million in funding. And if you want to include the additional $95 million in ADA improvements, I think that puts us at around $190 million. Don't ask me to math on a Monday, it's not happening, out of $412 million. So I was really heartened to see the commission take action and be responsive to engagement on that. I know Chair Van Brocklin had a lot to say about how electric vehicles are our future, and that we really need to be preparing strongly and moving into that transition quickly. Vice Chair Simpson also took the lead in directing funding, $20 million of 10 of state funds, 10 of federal funds for the Innovative Mobility Program. That really has a focus on climate-friendly transportation options and working with CBOs that have served historically excluded groups. And I think as someone who's been in the broader transportation industry for quite a while, I recently did the math on that. And that is sort of, I don't know if it's a number to be depressed about or to be proud about, but either way, I've been here for a bit. It's really great to see the effect of the advocacy work, and to see us also as an agency really being responsive to that and really looking at doing business in different ways. And with that, I'll pause.
Thank you so much. Okay, just looking at the clock here, we've got 20 minutes, and there are at least a couple more questions that I want to get through. So lots of optimism, don't want to bring us down, but just curious in terms of like, what has you most worried about our future, and what do you think we need to do about it? And I'm thinking about Cassie's remarks earlier, which I don't know if everybody got to see it, very compelling, talking about like our just all the things that we've experienced around climate these last few years, and with the heat dome and the wildfire smoke, and just on and on. So I'm curious, like, again, what has you most worried about our future, and what do you think we need to do about it? Commissioner Vega Peterson.
Yeah, so I mean, there are things that definitely concern me about the vision that we have of what our transportation system can be, and the path we need to take to get there, right? I mean, I think that's where the hard work is. And I think that we have to be working on more than one front at a time, right? So we have to be really looking at the investments that we're making in transportation and how we can really leverage those to be addressing multiple issues. I believe that transit is actually like an incredibly important way that we can address multiple issues. But we have challenges around transit. We have challenges around how we can pay for transit in this state. We have challenges right now with making sure that it's accessible to enough people in enough places, right? But we have to really, take the goals that we have, take the visions that we have, and really incorporate that into the investments that we're making. And I think that we have to also be doing a better job to think about how we're building our communities and the role that transportation plays in that too. And at East Portland, I have lived here for so many years now, and housing is really expensive in East Portland. And when we moved here 16 years ago, is because we could afford this. Like, this is a place I was in technology at that time. My husband was just starting out with a small business. Like, this was a place that we could afford. There used to be a bus line that ran right in front of my house that, like, after we had been here for a couple of years, that got canceled. And so, now we walk a half mile when we want to take transit. But at the same time, like, we still can live out here, but like, there's a lot of people who can't afford to live in East Portland anymore and are getting pushed farther and farther out. And that's actually having an impact on their ability to get to their jobs, get to their churches, get to, where the places that they need to go. And so I think we have to also be doing a better job of working across areas of investment, like for transportation and housing. And so the things that we can do to invest in affordable housing and be smart about where we're putting them, so that we are leveraging like access to transit and access to community centers, and I mean community centers in terms of where people are living and working. I think that's incredibly important. And but I also feel really strongly that we can't just be putting affordable housing in the less expensive places, because those are going to be further out. We have to be looking at how we can take areas that have jobs that are walkable, and putting housing there as well. I am more of an optimistic person than a pessimistic person. So I do have to say, like, I do see things like the bus rapid transit investments that we're having on Division, what we're going to be doing out in Tualatin Valley TV Highway in Washington County, right? All of those things are actually like part of the solution, and making smart investments around housing there is really important. And then I think we have to be also engaging with employers to talk about what their needs are in terms of getting people to work in a way so that we can have people have access to living wage jobs, right? And I think that's what you were talking about with Mayor Stovall's, like, transit is the way people get from poverty to prosperity. Like, if you have that, and so that's why Montgomery County has been doing some kinds of investments like that, because of the dollars that we've gotten through the state, to make sure that we can help people get to that, get to their jobs as well. So it's there's a lot of work to do, but I think that we just need to be really smart about leveraging the best investments, knowing that that we've got constrained resources.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Fye.
Thank you. I feel like it's so easy to go after Commissioner Vega Peterson. I just have to say ditto. I would add, I worry about when it comes to solving all the societal problems and centering the social determinants of health. And I worry about, we're doing more of the same thing, or that element of it is what keeps me up, and figure out how do we center the person when we're solving a problem, and make sure that it's, when we're talking about transportation, we're not just talking about, major streets, but we're also talking about everything within that major streets. The people that live near that, how do they utilize the street, that road? What other systems that are into play, like transit, and not having, we build the road and then we think about transit later on, or we fix the road and then we figure out, okay, what else could be added onto this road and what else is missing. So I really, I'll be that pessimistic for you, Commissioner Vega Peterson, and say I worry about doing more of the same and continuing this perpetual path of othering others and leaving people behind. We have historically left out and historically marginalized communities that can be dated back to all the way to slavery. So when does this stop, and when did we, narrow the gap, and how do we get on that path to narrow the gap, even if it's disparity around transportation or transit use or whatever. I see it. So I'm, as a freshman commissioner, that's really what keeps me, how do we make sure the systems are connected and comprehensive, but more importantly, are coordinated together. I live off of 198th. It's a beautiful road that Washington County has a MISTIP fund that we call Major Street Improvement, Transportation Improvement Plan, and that's the money that residents in Washington County are taxed, and it goes to major streets, all that money. And the street that I live off benefited from that taxpayers' money. And but one of the things that you usually
Commissioner Fye, I think you froze, at least on my screen. I see some heads nodding from other folks. And Commissioner Fye, you are still frozen. So I don't know if it's I know first in some Zoom spaces, when people turn off their camera, that helps with connection, but well, we're trying to figure out what's going on there. And I don't know, Maddie, if you can, or someone can reach out to Commissioner Fye, but Libra, why don't we move on to you, and then we can come back to Commissioner Fye.
Excellent. I was a cliffhanger. I was waiting for the
I know.
sentence. I think when I think about concerns, there's several things that I can list. Obviously, I think we all understand that a transportation issue is also a housing issue, and we already have a crisis. And then we've got greenhouse gas pollution policies that are not up to par. We've got development impacts, also decreasing our ability to have sound transportation systems. And of course, human life. I mean, that's a big concern here for me. And Commissioner Vega Peterson and Commissioner Fye both said something that really is resonating with me. And to like summarize, we need to begin to silo bust, right? Like, people don't experience things in a silo, but yet we make decisions in a silo. And so we have to be better at that. And I'm concerned that if we don't have more individuals at the tables to make decisions that have lived experiences that are diverse and really represent the community that you're making a decision for, it's really easy for us not to fix the silos that we're making decisions in. And all of that is to say that my major concern is operationalizing all of our passion. Like, how do we actually put that into action where people feel it in their everyday life? And so that's the biggest concern I have, is how do we operationalize it in a way that's connected, so that when people are in whatever transport option they choose, they feel the passion that we all have, and they experience it in a way that results in success for them. That is my biggest concern.
Thank you so much, Libra. And I'm also just watching the clock here. We've got like 9 minutes, and I know we got started a little bit late. Commissioner Fye, you cut out, and so I don't know if there was something that you wanted to just quickly wrap up with before we turn back to JC and Karen?
Oh, I don't know where I left off, so I'll just pass it along. And
Okay.
I do have to log off in a few minutes to go pick up my kiddo.
Okay. JC.
So that's a very good question, Jackie. What do I worry about? And I would say that there are two areas. Short-term worry is staffing. For us to put service out on the street, TriMet, we need people to drive our buses. And a shameless plug, if you know someone who's looking for a good job, we have $7,500 signing bonus, starting salary of $25-24 an hour. It's a really, really good job. And so to give you just a little flavor for it, we need 352 bus drivers to get us back to our pre-pandemic. So I would just say staffing shortage in the first and foremost for our future, because we want to deliver reliable service and we need people. So there's my shameless plug. My other worry is, can we act fast enough as a region? And I'm an impatient person, although my husband would tell you differently, God love him. But can we as a region act quick enough? So how do we get all of our jurisdictional partners, all of our community groups together to really act quickly on some of these transportation projects? And Commissioner Vega Peterson noted BRT, a bus rapid transit on TV Highway or 82nd Avenue, which is has so many opportunities on it. How do we move quicker? In fact, in one of my meetings the other week, I pressed on Metro staff, and God love them. I love all those Metro staffers. They do such a great job. But I said, how do we move this along faster? What can we, because people need help right now. People need transit right now. They need the access right now. And so for us, how do we think differently about delivering on some of these transportation projects that take 2 to 6 years to plan and build? How do we move up that timeline? Again, people need the help right now. So those are my two worries.
Thank you. Karen.
I have a lot of things I worry about, but I think one of my top worries is I was just looking at current year data on serious injuries and fatalities on our system, and the numbers are up. They are up dramatically, horrifyingly up. And we also know from research that ODOT published last year that people of color and people from low-income neighborhoods are more likely to be hurt or killed on our facilities. And that is extremely troubling. So what can we do, again, more quickly to make those corridors safer for people who walk and bike? Understanding the history of land use patterns and development, and how cities have annexed suburban areas where they were never designed for walking. They were designed so people could live in their neighborhoods with their white picket fences and then drive on into their jobs in town every day. But that's not where we're at and who we are anymore. So then as those areas become parts of cities, you're inheriting these substandard roadways that were never meant for people to be walking and rolling. So one of the things that we're doing to try to help with it, and it's a drop in the bucket. It's a Great Streets program that the commission just got us launched on. It's $50 million. And our roots are focused on throughput, driving through, getting through places instead of to put, getting people to the places they're trying to go. So the Great Streets program will make improvements and investments in ODOT highways that also happen to be main streets first. There are main streets first and ODOT highways probably second. At least that's how I think about them. So how do we, both in rural and urban areas, make those investments and improvements that make it easier for people to walk, bike, and roll in those areas? Again, just a drop in the bucket, but it's a start. It's so darn expensive now. Why is everything so expensive and hard?
Yes. Okay. So we have like 4 minutes, although I don't know if we're allowed to run a little bit over since we started later. And Commissioner Fye, I know you've got to go and pick up your kids. So I really appreciate your time with us, and just so much gratitude for the work that you do and just what you represent. So thank you. So lightning round. Where do we go from here? Super lightning round. What do you need from stakeholders to accomplish your vision? Again, lightning round. Commissioner Vega Peterson.
We need we need active engagement from people. We need people to be engaging as we're talking about these really big, massive projects that are shaping our region, like the I-5 bridge crossing, like the investments that are being made with all of the federal dollars. We need people to be reaching out and engaging in this work. I think that's the most important thing, and demanding more from us, honestly. Like, we need to hear what people need and what they need to really make our transportation system work, not just putting money to a project, but what are the specifics in that project that are going to actually make it work for them.
Great, thank you. Lieber Ford.
We need more youth. We need youth to tell us what they feel, want, because at the end of the day, they'll be picking up the baton and telling and living it and making decisions. So we need to involve them now and allow them to have more space.
Great, thank you. JC?
I love the speed round. I would say, how do we challenge one another to think differently about things? You know, Commissioner Fye made notion of like, how do, you know, doing the same things over and over, how do we think differently? And I really appreciated that comment. And I think for all of us, as we look at the goals ahead of us, and there's some big goals, how do we challenge each other and respect each other enough to listen to those new ideas, that new thinking? So that's what I would say.
Thank you. And Karen?
Very similar vein, partnership. We're doing some things differently with one of our new programs. So we are going to be doing outreach. We are going to be hiring contractors that come from the communities and work with the communities that we want to work with to get their help and to better engage. From there, it's more than just and getting engagement and what are the funding criteria, what are the projects, what are the things that people most need now coming out of the pandemic to improve that access again. Also, what are the barriers to contracting? What do CVOs experience or small organizations experience when they're trying to access our funding, and how can we remove those barriers? And then I think the third big thing is capacity building. The groups who are on the ground doing this work, how can we help build capacity so that they can extend their reach and reach more people? And I'm going to drop in the chat an email address and contact information. So if folks are interested in being engaged and involved in this process, reach out, but also know that we are going to be coming your way and we do not expect you to come to us, but I will never miss an opportunity to say, give me your ideas, and I look forward to your partnership. So thanks.
Thank you so much for that. And we have a minute to spare. So I will just really want to quickly build on what you said, Karen, about capacity building. I have gotten to work with a lot of community-based organizations over the last 2 years through the pandemic. And we've like, I work in the state of Oregon, I work for the governor, and we've certainly realized the value of really working with and through CVOs. And we've heard loud and clear that we need to build their capacity as we keep asking them for things. And so some of that looks like, and I think some of you are already doing this, actually like paying people to participate, you know, recognizing that that they may not be able to take time out of work, that they may have childcare issues, they may have transportation issues. So really looking at all those things, like what do we need to do in order to support people and organizations in showing up. And so I'm just really heartened by what you've had to say about really kind of listening to voices and thinking about you know, different ways of doing things. And I'm not a user experience designer, but I keep thinking of something Commissioner Fye said is just the lived experience, and how do we meet the needs of folks with lived experience in making sure that our transportation system is kind of safe, equitable, and accessible in connecting people to where they want to and need to go. So Sarah, anything you'd like to say to close this out?
I just want to say thank you very much to you, Jackie, for all the experience that you bring, not just to our organization, but to this conversation. So thank you very much for moderating. And thanks to all of you for being willing to be here. I would be remiss as the executive director of not just the Street Trust, but the Street Trust Action Fund if I didn't implore you to vote this election season. It's very, very important. that you get behind transportation champions, get behind emerging leaders. It's not always easy to change course. And so we need to be out there talking to people all across our region who might not understand why transit is so important in their communities, why we need safe routes for schools. All these things are basic issues that we can talk to our neighbors with every election season, not just this one, but every election season. So it's very important. Thanks again to Commissioner Vega Peterson, to Chair Ford, to JC and Karen from TriMet and ODOT for being here as well. And I hope I'll see all of you back here after lunch at 1 o'clock. We've got an afternoon chock full of sessions, and have a great lunch, everyone. We'll see you back for our sessions after lunch. Thanks again, everybody, for coming this morning and participating. We appreciate you.